Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to That D Plus Show. Class is in session for the only show from that nerdy site that lets you know what kind of quality to expect right from the name. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and each week we dive into a different Disney Plus offering and discuss its history, how it holds up today, and our general impressions on the thing. This show is made possible entirely by the support of our patrons over at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. So if you like the show and you can support us over there, we would definitely appreciate it. But if you can't, no big deal. The fact that you're listening is awesome. And we, of course, would love it if you like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that good stuff. Joining me today, once again, we have Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cameron?
Solo. Han Solo.
I don't think Cameron has ever understood the idea of dead air in podcasting. I think that might just be the core problem.
100%. I just
yeah, exactly.
I'm totally okay taking a moment to do like an out loud ellipses.
Yeah.
So
it definitely works better if I can
cool.
when I
That's
can
a
see
good
you.
one.
Yeah. Anyway, we also have Frank Bazzani. How you doing, Frank?
Doing good. I'm excited to talk about this one.
All right. And Logan Wilkinson. How you doing, Logan?
I am here to talk about this one.
Yeah. This is an interesting one, I think. Of course, as Cameron alluded to, this week is all about Solo, a Star Wars story. The last of the theatrically
Legit movies,
released standalone films and Star Wars films. We'll be wrapping up our summer of Star Wars next week with just a special little treat of the Empire of Dreams documentary. In large part, I guess, to leave this with probably a better taste in our mouths than maybe Solo will. Who knows? I mean, I think Solo has its moments, but I think Empire of Dreams and returning to the trilogy, which we all pretty much universally loved here, and I believe remains the top 3 in our ranking. It'll be nice to kind of revisit that. But yes, so this is part of our Summer of Star Wars. A little bit of housekeeping for you. I spent this week cleaning up our YouTube channel a little bit in terms of the playlists and then adding a whole bunch of new playlists. So if you go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/thatnerdysite, there are now subgroups and separate playlists for That D Plus Show Marvel and That D Plus Show Star Wars. And so you can find all of our Star Wars episodes in that playlist, as well as not only the Summer of Star Wars, but also the one-offs that we had done prior to that, be it the Bad Batch or the Clone Wars TV show or the Mandalorian behind the scenes stuff, the Mandalorian just in general, me and Frank talking about the Lego Star Wars holiday special. They're all in there. So a whole bunch of new playlists added to our YouTube this week and kind of rearranged and resituated. So you can go check that out, as well as some of our Let's Plays are kind of have been grouped together more effectively, I think. So go check out our YouTube, youtube.com/thatnerdysite to see all those updates. I also there was also a Hamilton That D Plus Show Hamilton playlist of the I think 6 or 7 episodes we did centered around Hamilton last year. So basically last year's summer project. Anyway, back to Solo, a Star Wars story. This was originally released May 25th, 2018, which I didn't realize how recent that was until I started looking at the other releases of the time. You had A Quiet Place, which had come out April 6th of that year. You had Avengers Infinity War, April 27th. The week before this, Deadpool 2 came out on May 18th. A couple of weeks later, we had Ocean's 8 come out on June 8th. We had Won't You Be My Neighbor also came out on June 8th. So there's Logan gave a thumbs up to Ocean's 8, and I knew he would give a thumbs up to Won't You Be My Neighbor. A wonderful documentary about Mr. Rogers that I think any of us who have seen it really loved. On the Disney side of things, this was when The Incredibles 2 came out, June 15th. Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom came out June 22nd. Ant-Man and the Wasp followed up Infinity War in the Marvel side of things on July 6th. Sorry to Bother You also came out July 6th. And for Joey Noel, shout out to Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again. That came out July 20th. It was an interesting year for movies.
It's a weird ass summer. Yeah,
it was. So on that, I have a little this may be more in line with trivia, but in this conversation, I think it'll be fitting to put here. So I pulled together the domestic box office top numbers for 2018, as well as the worldwide box office numbers for 2018. Anybody want to guess where Solo: A Star Wars Story fell on the domestic box office first in terms of the ranking for 2018? As we've already touched on some of the movies that came out this year: Infinity War, Incredibles 2, Fallen Kingdom.
I'm gonna say ninth.
I'm gonna say sixth.
Cameron, sixth.
I was thinking fifth.
You said
Like-
fifth for Frank, and what'd you say?
You're gonna
Logan?
Price
Ninth?
is Right me?
No, I wasn't. I was
said
thinking
ninth.
5 before. I was just like, I thought it was
I'm
funny
messing
we
with
were
you,
in the
fine.
same neighborhood.
Yeah.
Like we just kind of went to that same because like the top 3 doesn't sound right.
So,
Yeah, I know.
so domestic box office for 2018, number 1, Black Panther. Number 2, Avengers Infinity
Really?
War. Because number 1, Black Panther had about $22 million more domestically than Infinity War.
Interesting.
Incredibles
Yeah,
2,
no.
number 3. Number 4, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. Number 5, Aquaman. Number 6, Deadpool
Oh.
2. Number 7,
Yeah.
The Grinch. Number 8, Mission Impossible Fallout.
I
Number-
win.
Number 9, Ant-Man and the Wasp. Number 10,
Oh shoot.
Bohemian Rhapsody. Number 11,
Oh.
A Star is Born. Number 12, Solo: A Star Wars Story.
Hey, I'll take
Damn.
it by default. you know?
Just
Those
barely,
are all
barely beating out number 13, Venom.
Oof.
So
Okay, let's be fair here. There are a lot of films that were like very popular that year. We're talking what, 4 Marvel films?
Just 3
Black
at
Panther,
least.
Avengers. If you count Deadpool 2
Ant-Man.
and
Oh,
yeah, Deadpool
And
2, and then Ant-Man the Wasp. Yeah.
Okay, so you had 4 big superhero films.
Mhm. I mean, plus Aquaman would be fine.
Plus Aquaman.
Oh, sorry, yeah. So Aquaman 5, like Jurassic World.
Yeah.
Starring Chris Pratt, who was like
But this was
real hot at that time.
this
like,
was
as-
the
as it came out.
sequel.
This is the second
Jurassic
one.
Oh, this is the
Yeah,
sequel.
which wasn't
Okay,
as-
then
yeah.
that one.
I mean, which still
Okay.
did, gangbusters,
Yeah.
clearly. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's, I mean, but yes to all of that, Cameron, but also Star Wars usually in the top, whatever, even with all that aside.
Yeah, but this is also in post Last Jedi world.
I mean, sure. I don't think, I think that is less of a factor, and it's more word got out that Solo wasn't that great, and people didn't
Yeah,
show
sure.
up for it. It didn't have repeat viewings and stuff like that. So that was the
Well, yeah, but I
that
also
was
remember
domestic.
at the time. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, you can go ahead and say your thing.
Okay, yeah. I just remember at the time a lot of people like online were like, "Well, I'm not going to go see Solo because of how they felt about the Last Jedi."
Yeah,
So,
I mean that's I would say that's a vocal minority of people
Oh,
on the
for
internet,
sure,
and
but
a lot
I
of those
mean,
people on the
yeah.
internet were already the same people that were out there being like, Solo, like, why is Solo a thing? Why should this exist? We didn't want this. We don't want a prequel story about Han Solo. So anyway, on the worldwide box office side of things, anybody want to, now that you know the domestic side of things, do you want to take guesses on how this fared globally?
I I wonder if it did better, or if it did worse. Because my first thought was it must have done worse, but it might have done better.
I'm gonna
Like-
do ninth again. I'm just gonna go for it. I'm gonna do ninth again.
Okay, ninth for
I'm
Logan,
going to say 13th.
13th
So
for
I was
Cameron.
kind of thinking that too. I'll go 14th then. Just the one after.
So number 1, Avengers: Infinity War,
Nice.
overtaking Black Panther, which was number 2. Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom at number 3, Incredibles number 4, Aquaman number 5, Bohemian Rhapsody number 6. Venom shoots all the way up to number 7 on this list because of international box office. Mission Impossible Fallout number 8, Deadpool 2 number 9, Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald number 10,
Oh,
Ant-Man the
wow.
Wasp number 11, Ready Player One number 12,
Oh,
Jeez.
Operation Red Sea and Detective Chinatown 2, which were Chinese films, at number 13 and 14. The Meg, number 15. Ralph Breaks the Internet, number 16. Hotel
Jeez.
Transylvania 3,
Did it make
Summer
the top
Vacation,
20?
at number 17.
Hotel Transylvania 3 beat it? Oh.
Yeah, The Grinch here at number 18.
Is that
Bumblebee
the
at
Jim
number
Carrey
19.
Grinch?
No, this was an animated
The hell?
Grinch.
Okay,
that came out
They
that
did a
year.
new Grinch. Okay.
Yeah, no, Jim Carrey Grinch was like years ago.
That's why I was like,
also
did
directed
did
by
they
Ron Howard, I
re-release it? Oh, wow.
Bumblebee was number 19. Dying to Survive, another Chinese release, number 20.
It didn't make the top 20?
A Star is Born, number 21. Rampage, number 22. Mamma Mia, here we go again, number 23. And Solo,
Oh
a Star
my
Wars story at number
God.
24. The most heartbreaking thing, number 25, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Oof. Which is such a better
Sad.
movie.
Sad.
Oh my god.
Breaks my heart that
Even
that
top 20?
was it
Jeez,
still
that
gets
is
beat
a-
out by Solo, a Star Wars story, but also
Freak
that
though.
it was
so
that low.
international
It's
release,
gotta
though,
be the
you pull in even a
worst.
wider swath of like
Yeah.
really big movies at the same time. So like I understand why it gets pushed down to 24 because all of a sudden you get films that would come out that came out at the end of the prior year rolled out into international in 2018.
No,
Or sorry, 20.
I had it.
Yeah.
I filtered the list to look specifically for 2018 releases.
Okay.
So yeah, those
Wait,
all
Ready
came out.
Player One. Ready Player One made less domestically than Solo.
Yeah,
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah, by
okay.
about 10 million, it looks like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um.
So it would have
That's
been
gotta be
like
the worst
coming
any
up
Star
on the
Wars
list there.
movie has ever done, right? In terms
I
of
think
apart
it
from
is.
final year
That-
placement.
apart from the Clone Wars animated one, yes, I believe so.
Yeah, not counting. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It was a rough year,
God.
2018 for Star Wars, especially given their normal heights of the high spots there. But yeah, when I was looking up some trivia and stuff, I was just like, whoa, wait, it's not even in the top 10 films of this year. Let me look and see where it fell. Then yeah, just kind of diving down that rabbit hole. I was like, okay, but how did it
Does
how did
Solo-
it do internationally? And it didn't do great internationally either.
Does Solo have the Star Wars title attached to it?
It is Solo, a Star Wars story. So yes, in the same way that Rogue One has it attached,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
it's that. I mean, that's certainly possibly a factor. But yeah, it's
No, I just think I
Yeah.
think you're right. The word got out that a lot of people just didn't like the film. A lot of people like really hate the film, to be
Mhm.
honest. So.
yeah. I mean, it definitely has a lot of stupid things that I'm sure we will talk about. But yeah, it's and it also, I think, at least for people like us that kind of follow the scene a little bit, like word obviously had gotten out that it had troubled production. They changed directors midway through, and like that was not a secret in the industry, certainly. But yeah, I think I think there's also an element of like it is a Star Wars story like Rogue One that doesn't really have Jedi involved or anything like that. It doesn't have lightsaber duels. Like it doesn't have a lot of the elements people think of when they think of Star Wars, like your more generalized public. And yeah, I think there was a lot of like, well, people just didn't really want to see a Han Solo movie without Harrison Ford or something like that. Like there's a love for that character in his supporting or ensemble role among the saga, but people people weren't clamoring for the prequel in the same way that like people weren't clamoring for a Finding Dory 2 or something like that years later. That said, people clearly liked Incredibles 2, or at least they showed up for it. Whether they liked it or not, who knows? Anyway, so yeah, just a fun little trip down box office lane, since that it just so far outside the norm for Star Wars, I think. Back to the normal little shticks here. We have a runtime of 2 hours and 15 minutes. In the Star Wars timeline of things, this did come out, as Cameron mentioned earlier, between The Last Jedi, which had come out December 15th, 2017, so this was only 5 months removed, and then The Rise of Skywalker would come out December 20th, 2019.
I will say,
yeah.
not to just dive back into the box office thing again, I think that was part of the issue too, is that it was such a fast turnaround from A Last Jedi, right? And like I feel like it was this back-to-back movie thing where like I feel like we really begin to see a lot of the stories about how are people going to get burned out on Star Wars? Are people going to get exhausted of all the movies coming out back to back to back to back to back? And like this came out and proved their point, even I think without actually being a good example of people are burnt out on Star Wars and more of just like people maybe don't like this particular movie. And maybe there's a little bit of Last Jedi is divisive, right? Because that is a movie that I sort of think it's like in between what Cameron and Trevor said, where like I think more people than a vocal minority don't like Last Jedi or had issues with it, right? Like there's a vocal minority who like despises it, But I do think that movie very much like split the Star Wars community down the middle in a lot of ways. Like that is like a 50-50 movie. And I think even like casual, Star Wars fans saw that movie and were like, oh, I'm not sure about that maybe. And then when, 4 or 5 months later, Sully comes out, they're like, well, the last one wasn't that great. Maybe I'll just, take a pause on this one and wait for like the next one to come out, right, in a year from now. So I think there are just a lot of contributing factors to what led to Solo's depressed box office total.
Yeah. Well, I also think there might have been the case of people being like, well, I wasn't I really didn't like or I really wasn't a fan of The Last Jedi, so I'll wait to see what people have to say about it. And so you don't get that initial box office boom from that. So like, because people have people were cool to the franchise at that point, and like it's entirely possible. I honestly think that there is just a myriad of things that just like this film was going up against a lot of odds, and in a lot of ways it just does not overcome them. Whether it's production, whether it's marketing, whether it's just the circumstances that it came out in. Like it came out in like right next to Infinity War.
Yeah, it came out a month after Infinity, or a week after Deadpool 2. So that was what I was going to weigh in on, is like it. I mean, let's see. I'm pulling up like the box office, like the highest grossing box office the week that this came out, and it opened domestically at, let's see, what does that look like for the week total? 85 million.
For Star Wars opening week?
Yeah, 85 million. Avengers, which was in its like 5th week, was still doing 17, 18 million like that at that point. And Deadpool, which was here in its 2nd week, I think still did about half that at about 45 million. So like it was definitely a depressed outing, perhaps because people that go see the big blockbuster Disney, Marvel, Star Wars movies had been to the theaters twice in the last month if they'd gone and seen those other ones. So maybe they were like, yeah, I'll sit this one out. Who knows? Lots of conversation about it, I'm sure.
Well, I also think how many quote unquote nerd properties came out that year, right? Like at some point, I think like Hollywood has, I guess the pandemic definitely forced them to figure it out, but there's only so much pie at the table. And the more nerd properties you push, like I got burnt out super hard in superhero fatigue, to the point where I still haven't watched Aquaman. Like I watched Ant-Man and the Wasp on a plane, because it was free. It's getting to the point now where like with superhero stuff, like you almost have to pay me to go see them. Like I am very much a victim of like the Marvel DC superhero fatigue. And I was even more so back in 2018.
Right.
So like I get it, but like I said, it's a victim for a lot of things, and on top of that, it's not the greatest film to ever exist either. So.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those, like, I always think when people talk about like, oh, they're doing too much Star Wars, people are going to get fatigued out. I think, well, people have not. I mean, like individuals might have been fatigued on superhero stuff, like you kind of allude to there, Cameron. But the box office, apart from post-pandemic stuff, doesn't really support that, on a macro level. So it was one of those things that like I was always like, but we're getting like 3 Marvel movies a year, and people are still showing up. So one Star Wars thing a year, if those Star Wars things are good, I think is completely sustainable. But when those things end up not being good, then that will be kind of a factor, certainly. Anyway, roll call. As I mentioned, the director here ended up being Ron Howard, who had previously directed films like Cocoon, Willow, Backdraft, Apollo 13, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, A Beautiful Mind, The Da Vinci Code, Frost Nixon, Rush, and looks like his most recent film that came after this was Hillbilly Elegy, which I believe Glenn Close got some award buzz for last year.
Best Supporting Actress.
Writers were Jonathan and Lawrence Kasdan. Jonathan Kasdan had previous experience. I mean, like, he strikes me distinctly as a like legacy kind of hire here, because his previous writing credits were 1 episode of Freaks and Geeks, 5 episodes of Dawson's Creek, and 2 movies I'd never heard of called In the Land of Women and The First Time. But because he's Lawrence Kasdan's kid, got to work on this. And he is slated, or he's the writer of at least 1 episode of the upcoming Willow Disney Plus series. And we've talked about Lawrence Kasdan on the show before. He had an opening 1-2 punch of The Empire Strikes Back and Raiders of the Lost Ark as his first 2 films out. Would go on to work on films like Return of the Jedi, The Bodyguard, Wyatt Earp, and The Force Awakens prior to this film. Starring, we have Alden Ehrenreich taking on the role of Han Solo in The Poorly Thankless Job. He had done his earliest acting credit, was an episode of Supernatural all the way back in 2005, which just makes me realize how long that show had been going on.
Yep.
And I remember his name really first coming to prominence on the film Hail Caesar, which is that's not the Coen brothers. Is it the Coen brothers? Yeah,
it is. Yeah.
I remember him, people. I don't really follow Coen brothers movies or anything, but I remember people being like, "This Alden Ehrenreich kid in Hail Caesar is really good." He is in the series Brave New World for Peacock, and his next upcoming project is a film titled Cocaine Bear, whatever that means. So,
It's a great name.
Joonas Suotamo gets second billing here as Chewbacca, having played Chewbacca or being a Chewbacca double since The Force Awakens in the Disney era. Woody Harrelson playing the role of Beckett, of course, rose to prominence on the TV show Cheers, as well as films of that kind of 90s era, White Men Can't Jump, Kingpin. Later on, he would go into Zombieland. Had a run as Hamish Abernathy on The Hunger Games. He was in, I think this was the first season of True Detective. I don't know. I've never really watched True Detective, but everybody was like, he was really good in it. And then he was also in Venom and will be in Venom Let There Be Carnage next. So there's Woody Harrelson making that Marvel money. Emilia Clarke playing Kira, of course, best known from Game of Thrones, but she also played Sarah Connor in Terminator Genesis. She was in Last Christmas, and she is slated to be in the upcoming Secret Invasion series. I don't know if that's rumored or if she's officially confirmed. I don't remember, but it's on her IMDb listing. So there you go. Donald Glover playing Lando Calrissian here.
Hell yeah.
Of course, coming up in the series Community. He was also in the couple animated episodes of the animated series Ultimate Spider-Man, the creator and star of Atlanta. He was in Spider-Man Homecoming in the MCU. He was after this, he would go on to be Simba in the live action, in quotes, Lion King. And he is slated to be in the, I think this is another series, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, with fellow cast member here, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, sometime in the future. That's like a future project of his. Tandy Newton playing Val. Some of her earlier roles included Mission Impossible 2, The Chronicles of Riddick, Crash, Pursuit of Happiness, W, and probably one of her most well-known roles in recent years, recurring character on Westworld on HBO. Phoebe Waller-Bridge playing L337, which I did not realize was the droid's full name until looking at this cast list and hating it a little bit more. She, of course, from Broadchurch, probably best known for her work as the creator and star of Fleabag. She's also in a couple episodes of His Dark Materials, and she is slated to be in Indiana Jones 5 and the aforementioned Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Paul Bettany stepping into the role of Dryden Voss here. Much like I mentioned last week with Alan Tudyk, I first remember seeing Paul Bettany in A Knight's Tale, so shout out to him playing Geoffrey Chaucer. And like the first time I ever saw him, I'm pretty sure he was just walking on screen naked because Chaucer was
Yeah.
broke. He would go on to work to collaborate with Ron Howard on a number of other projects like Beautiful Mind and The Da Vinci Code, and he has been playing Jarvis/The Vision in the MCU since the original Iron Man back in 2008. Also, shout out if you're a fan of Wimbledon. He was in that too.
He was. It's good.
Jon Favreau playing Rio Durant, the pilot that Han takes over for. Of course, storied history as well, but I will shout out PCU because that was a film I remember seeing on like Comedy Central a lot growing up. It's like Jon Favreau and the douchebag from Entourage, Jeremy Piven, I think is the other guy in that. He was also in Batman Forever. Did not realize that. But of course,
I think who's in Batman Forever?
I don't know, one of the like a henchman or
Just like a nobody.
citizen or something like so. Yeah, so it was. I mean, it was like a small part. He was in, of course, Swingers was probably his big breakout role. And then he has been playing Happy Hogan since he directed Iron Man 1 with the MCU. Would go on to be in a handful of episodes of Star Wars The Clone Wars. He did a movie I really enjoy called Chef. And then he was in, or he not only has he been kind of the showrunner alongside Dave Filoni in The Mandalorian, but he's also the voice of Pos Vizsla in The Mandalorian Season 1, which is a reference to his Clone Wars character Pre-Vizsla. So, yeah. And then lastly, Aaron Kellyman playing Emphas Ness had done some TV work before this, but would go on to be playing somewhat similar role in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier as Morgan Thau in that. She's also in The Green Knight, which can be seen currently in theaters, and she will be in the upcoming series Willow. Then last little bit, a few cameos. Warwick Davis, once again, I think probably his last appearance here on our Summer of Star Wars series now as Weasel, one of Emphas Ness's kind of like entourage. Anthony Daniels has a cameo as Tack, who I don't know who that was. Maybe somebody else in that crew. Clint Howard playing Ralakili, a.k.a. like the head of the droid fights, and basically Ron Howard's good luck charm. And then Ray Park and Sam Witwer return as Maul and Maul's voice, respectively. Ray Park, of course, being the embodiment of Maul in The Phantom Menace, and Sam Witwer would go on to play Darth Maul in the Clone Wars and Rebels series. So, there you go. Trivia. They have a bad feeling about this. Anybody want to identify where or if this line appears in the movie?
It does not, because it's actually, I have a good feeling about this,
Yep.
and it's before Han takes them into the mall.
Yep. There's a fun little twist on it, quote unquote. In the galactic timeline, Solo begins, as I mentioned last week, in the year 13 BBY with Han and Kira on Corellia, and Han escaping to enlist in the Imperial Starfleet. However, the remainder of the film occurs in the year 10 BBY, so we basically jump time, which is another rarity in a Star Wars film. As mentioned last week, 13 BBY coincides with when Galen Erso was being taken by Orson Krennic to go continue work on the Death Star, and when Jyn was taken in by Saw Gerrera. In 10 BBY, the Galactic Empire established the Imperial Security Complex on Scarif that we would see at the end of Rogue One last week. And in either 10 or 9 BBY, the construction of the Death Star moved from Geonosis, where we see it at the end of Revenge of the Sith, to Scarif.
3, yeah.
So it was unclear in the galactic timeline of things which year that happened, but since it was maybe in 10, I wanted to include it here. Harrison Ford revealed that he has seen the movie and thinks it's phenomenal, in quotes, but skipped out on the premiere with the rest of the cast because he didn't want to steal Alden Ehrenreich's moment of glory. So I like that. At least it's got like his, passing the torch. If that's real, who knows if Harrison Ford has actually watched it. I don't know. Dryden Voss's facial stripes were added in post-production, according to Paul Bettany. He didn't know about it until he saw a photo Ron Howard sent to him. Han speaks to, which is probably indicative of like just the movie as a whole. Like, oh, I
Yep.
didn't know you were going to do that with this character. Maybe that would have changed how I played this character. Um, Han speaks to Chewbacca in the Wookiee language. It is the first time a non-Wookiee speaks the language, and the first time the language is translated on screen with subtitles. During an interview on The Graham Norton Show, Phoebe Waller-Bridge said that prior to her casting, she had never seen a Star Wars movie and didn't know what a droid was. She decided to play L337 as a human in her audition when one of the directors asked if she could be more, quote, droidy while making a mechanical hand gesture. She deduced that droids are robots. Although the casting directors asked her to try it again, they liked her original interpretation of the character and gave her the part. I don't know if I included it here, but there was another one that was basically like on set she had like a headpiece and like arm things, and then like a green screen suit that they would basically incorporate the wires and stuff in. So she is a much more like naturally moving, I guess, droid. Tobias Beckett wears the guard disguise seen in Return of the Jedi, where Lando wore it in an attempt to save Han Solo from Jabba the Hutt. Disguise was likely stored on the Millennium Falcon for all those years. When Luke and Obi-Wan meet Han Solo in A New Hope, Han boasts about the Millennium Falcon's speed by claiming that the ship made the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs. People quickly pointed out that a parsec is a measure of distance, not time. 1 parsec is about 3.26 light years, or just over 19 trillion miles. Star Wars printed materials explained that the Kessel Run is a route of fixed distance, but Han found a shortcut that limited his flight to about 12.5 parsecs. Force Awakens also references the Kessel Run. And then in this movie, the Kessel Run is normally 20 parsecs long, according to Lando, and runs along a series of corridors through a nebula. Han traversed the nebula itself, risking debris, very large creatures, and a phenomenon called the Maw, making it to the other end in just under 13 parsecs, which he rounded down to 20. Lando says it's impossible to make the run in less than 20 parsecs, so it's still quite a feat. I'm sure there will be many things to discuss on that. Phil Lord and Christopher Miller left as writers of The Flash to work on the film. They and the Flash movie that still has not come out, they and original editor Chris Dickens left halfway through production, citing irreconcilable creative differences with producer Kathleen Kennedy and co-writer Lawrence Kasdan. Studio report reveals that Lord and Miller's comedic screwball tone and freewheeling approach angered Kasdan, who wanted the film shot the way it was written. It also angered other production department heads who complained directly to Kennedy. Final straw came during a 2-week break while production moved from the UK to the Canary Islands. Kennedy, Kasdan, and replacement editor Pietro Scalia were shocked at the footage and decided to fire Lord and Miller. Related, after Ron Howard came on board, there was a question about who would receive the directing credit. Directors Guild rules state that a person who shot 90% of a film would get directing credit. Howard reshot 80% of Phil Lord and Christopher Miller's footage. As a compromise, Lord and Miller got executive producer credit, and Howard got the director's credit. Kira is proficient in Terraskasi, a fictional martial art originally developed to be used against force-wielding opponents. In Finnish, the name translates to Steel Hand, and I remember that because it is a notoriously terrible Star Wars game on the original PlayStation. Michael Kenneth Williams, a.k.a. Omar from The Wire, as well as a very prominent actor on Boardwalk Empire, was originally cast as Dryden Voss and shot various scenes when Phil Lord and Christopher Miller were directing the film. However, he was unable to return to the set for reshoots after Ron Howard took over, and the role was recast with Paul Bettany. On the first day of filming, Christopher Miller posted a photo with a clapperboard and the caption, "Han First Shot," a reference to the 1997 re-release of Star Wars Episode 4, A New Hope, when Greedo shot first, missing Han Solo. So there you go. There's the trivia I pulled together for this one. I've talked enough. Let's dive into what everybody else thinks about this one. How does it hold up? Is it good? Is it bad? Where do people think it falls in the conversation around Star Wars? I know, Logan, you were texting me earlier this week when you were watching it, so let's throw it to you to start.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not the worst Star Wars movie, right? I mean, Rise of Skywalker exists first and foremost, which I think is like actually objectively a bad film, right? And then I think that then after that we get to kind of this weird gray area that I always talk about to bring it back at least one last time on the series to James Bond movies, right? Where the two big sins for a James Bond movie or a Star Wars movie for me are don't be bad and don't be boring. And if you have to be one, I'd almost rather you be bad but fun than boring and, well made. And I think that Solo is sort of boring but like well made, right? Like it's fine. I just don't think it's that interesting, right? Like I think the example I gave to you was it feels a little bit like this is sort of like a Mandalorian episode, just stretched long. I think how I described it to you earlier in the week when we talked to Trevor was this movie works best when you forget it's about Han Solo. When you just think that it's about like a random group of like smugglers, I think the movie works pretty well at times. And then the minute they remind you that it's about Han Solo, they do it in like really big, bold letters, like, here's a big thing about Han, don't forget, watch right now. And then I'm like, I don't like this, right? Like, I think the movie gets in its own way a lot of the times in terms of being a prequel. And I think how we ended up doing the Summer of Star Wars and how we structured the episodes, it suffers being a prequel that follows Rogue One. Because Rogue One is how they all said, like, that's how you do a prequel. Like, that is the perfect example of like a prequel done well. And I don't think this is like a terrible prequel, but I do think it is how I would not do a prequel in a lot of ways, right? Like, I think there is not a lot of subtlety in Solo, whereas I think Rogue One had a lot of that. I think Rogue One had a lot of layers to what it did with its prequel story. I think it fleshed out a lot of things that we actually were kind of curious about and elevated the things around it. And I think that Solo doesn't really elevate the original trilogy or Han Solo as a character. Like, it doesn't make it worse, really, in any ways, other than like the name thing is stupid. But like, it just sort of does stuff, right? And it's weird watching it after Rogue One, like immediately after, like there's not that gap with Last Jedi, because I watch it and I'm like, man, I wish this did so many things just slightly different, right? Like, it's a movie that just needs like tweaks everywhere, but nothing like necessarily majorly overhauled to be done, right? Like, I'm definitely someone who thinks we never needed this movie. I will acknowledge, like, I never really needed or wanted a Han Solo story movie, because I think part of that character's coolness is the fact that he's just fully formed as like a dope guy doing cool things. And I don't need him when he's still kind of raw. But yeah, I think there's definitely ways that we could have gotten that story done really interesting. And there were like are flashes of it, right? And then the last thing I'll say in terms of like the quick reaction is that, like, in the least mean way possible, because I never want to like pick on someone. I don't think Emilia Clarke is a great film actress. Like, I've never seen her in a movie that I've really enjoyed her performance in, right? And like, that is obviously due to partially like how it's written and how it's directed and how she's kind of told to do it. But like, I don't love her character. I don't love her performance in this movie. And I don't really like her chemistry with the Han Solo character either. Like, that character falls flat and they make her a not insignificant part of the film either. And I think she's like the weakest element of the core cast.
Yes, it's interesting because I think, kind of touching on some of the things you touched on there, like, there are a lot of like solid elements in this that maybe in a different set of hands would have elevated to a better or more engaging movie. And I think one of the big concerns that a lot of people had when Ron Howard got brought in is that Ron Howard is a pretty just safe pair of hands. Like, he doesn't take significant risks in his like filmmaking in the way, especially compared to Lord and Miller. And that's definitely kind of what I feel like I'm seeing is like, I mean, like, it's like, oh, like, there are heist elements. That's cool. He's like, there's a gang of interesting characters. Like, the Lando and Han dynamic is, I think, usually really, really great. And it's just, it falls apart because it's just like not, like, it's not at that level at all times. It is just kind of like, there are glimmers of like, oh, that's a really cool idea or a cool moment. And then they're just like the complete opposite of that with Solo. But yeah, it's fascinating. And then I think there's also this element of Han, I don't think is a leading man. Like, and I think suffers like the same kind of thing that like How I Met Your Mother suffers when they try to make Barney a leading man instead of like a breakout supporting character and stuff like that. And you see like it's that kind of effect. It's the Barney Stinson effect basically of like, oh, that's a like great character when they work within an ensemble or when they're working like as kind of the best friend or the supporting or whatever, but trying to make them the like the centerpiece of a thing means that he can't always be roguish and charming in the way that you are used to of that character. Like I always talk about the idea that I think Alden Ehrenreich actually shows us more different layers of Han Solo in this movie compared to what Harrison Ford gets over the course of the series. And I like even rewatching it, I still largely stand by that. I didn't like sit down and like pull examples and stuff here and there, but like I think he's showing us like there are moments where he's afraid and like trying to get away and stuff, and we don't see Han Solo, Harrison Ford, have fear a ton. We see him surprised sometimes, but he's never usually like panicked or fearing for a loved one or something like that. He's kind of always got that cocky swagger that like we associate that character with. And I think because of that, it weirdly making him a more three-dimensional character ends up hurting what we love about the character in the other movies. Like we're not looking to that character for those moments, and maybe that character isn't the best or most capable at those moments. He's great as a romantic interest when it's "I love you, I know," and like it's a cool little line, but when it is a more drawn out relationship with Kira here or something like that, it doesn't have the impact that we are used to from that character or even necessarily want from that character, I think. So I think there's a lot of that at play as well, that ties into kind of some of the points you are raising there.
If I can say real quickly too, based off that one point, I think that relationship is also hampered by the fact that obviously we know that it doesn't end well, right? But B, to bring back the old kind of theme of the series here, Star Wars doesn't do history well in this movie, where it's like this is not that far removed from episode 4, and this is a pretty intense relationship he seems to be having with her and like this character, because clearly they know each other before the movie begins for presumably years, and then obviously this movie takes place over 3 years, so it's like a significant amount of time invested in this character that's never mentioned in the original trilogy, and that he just gets over real quick by the time that original trilogy comes around, and he's with Princess Leia and that whole dynamic, right? So it's this weird thing like, well, that makes
isn't it a
in
decade?
its own way. It's 10 years later, but still, like, presumably, like, they've been together since they were, like, kids, so a decade with her, right? Like, and it's that thing for me of, like, I think it weakens the Han and Leia relationship with what they're trying to do here, right? Like, I would have rather there not have been any of the romantic love interest dynamics. I think that is, throughout the entire film, the weakest through line, and I think it is one of the things that does like make it be like, oh, that's kind of weird when you get to the original trilogy too.
Yeah, let alone when you tie it into the thing that The Last Jedi was clearly setting up, of like the dice are really important to Han Solo. Oh, the dice are really important to Han Solo because they remind him of his old ex. That's a weird thing to carry forward, and for Luke to give Leia in hindsight. It's like that. What? Ugh.
Hey, here's Han's lucky dice that, like, you and I are unaware are actually tied directly to a person that he loved before you. Like, they're like, oh, this is a fun memento for Han. And it's like, wasn't a memento of Han, it was a memento of somebody else. Yeah.
I'm like, there's an element, I obviously am not the, like, for the sake of this show, I am, like, occasionally a dabbler into the lore and whatnot. But I also remember that I get the impression that in between Solo and A New Hope, Han does go on 10 years of adventures, becomes a bit of a more of a roguish womanizer kind of thing. I feel like I remember there being like IGN articles and stuff of like, this Star Wars comic just revealed that Han Solo, had a wife or something like that wasn't Leia and that wasn't Kira. So it's like,
yeah, it was a totally different character.
Yeah. And whether or not that was like
It's just
real
dumb as
or like
well.
a
Yeah.
part of a role they were playing for like a heist or something. I don't remember the ins and outs of it, but it was like, okay, there were other people in Han's life before we eventually get to Leia down the line. So yeah, like that's it. Like I don't. I mean, I'm not as bothered by that because, I mean, like I think it's quite natural that like, oh, like high school sweetheart or something, young fling from when they were younger doesn't last, and somebody, they grow out of that relationship and find somebody years down the line. Like that doesn't surprise me too much, but it is.
especially after a decade.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same kind of thing that I think we touch on a lot with prequels of like, yeah, because this is a character, or these are characters that were never mentioned in the the future of the saga, and we never hear like Han talking about like this old crew of people he ran with. It's like, okay, you're retconning a lot by creating this entire story around these people that we've never heard of before. um at the same point, I do appreciate that they try and tie it in small ways to the larger universe. Like I like the line of Beckett basically saying like, you're the guy that killed Aura Singh, who is badass bounty hunter from the Clone Wars saga and series and stuff like that. So it's like it's cool that they like, that's a small use of them taking the history of Star Wars that you kind of touch on, Logan. And I think that's when it works best, when it is like a subtler thing, as opposed to like, yeah, here's a whole bunch of people that Han ran with back in the day, but also, hey, here's him meeting Chewbacca and how they become lifelong friends and stuff. It's like, it's hits and misses here and there, and the whole, again, Lando back and forth, I think is a lot of fun, but a lot of that is Donald Glover is like just really, really good at what he does. So, Frank, let me throw it over to you. What were your thoughts here on Solo?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what's already kind of been said and thrown out there about this movie, and it's definitely because it's not a bad movie and it's not the worst Star Wars even, but it's also not great. Like, and it's and I think it's kind of just like, for me, it's largely even just kind of like whatever, even it's so kind of like meh,
Yeah.
like and. But rewatching it now, and that's definitely how I felt the first time watching it too. But rewatching it now, like there's parts of it I enjoyed for sure, and I think to a point we've kind of brought up already, like there's a lot of interesting and cool ideas. It just didn't get like executed on in like the best possible way. And there were some things that even I was like, man, I like that about this movie, and even the way it shows like some of the Empire, or even besides the Empire, I just mean some of these people that are just more on like the outskirts of typical Star Wars. Like there's obviously these like this band of rogues there that he's like smuggling with and heisting with, but then there's also this like the I forget her actual name, but the Carly Morgenthau character, that she has like this whole band of people. Like it's interesting to see these people who are like more rebels and like on the outskirts of like the universe, kind of, but for me, then in hindsight, when I was thinking about it, I was like, well, then what does that a lot cooler in Star Wars? The Mandalorian. I was like, the Mandalorian does a lot of what's like cool about this movie, but just like better and in like a more interesting way. And to another point that I think was brought up too, like I don't mind them doing like a prequel, especially like trying to set up Solo, but there's so many questions this movie answers that were just not even questions or things that we needed to really know about. Like there's just so much that was like we understood about Solo and his backstory and his relationship with people and Chewie, and like even with Lando. And like I agree that the Lando and Han dynamic is probably, I think, the strongest part of this movie, and I really love Lando in this movie because I don't think we touched on it enough when we talked about it before, but like I love original Lando is like a character. So Donald Glover coming in is like this other amazing Lando is fantastic. But it's this thing of like I never had these questions, and I never needed some of these things answered or explained to me. And like I think Logan kind of said something that is important too, where like if it wasn't Han and it was just like, we're going to do a heist movie, but it's in Star Wars, like this is Ocean's 11, but it's Star Wars, like that could be awesome.
Yeah.
Like, but instead it's just like, here's Beckett and, gives Han the gun, the blaster that he has like for forever. That like this incredibly meaningful thing. He just kind of throws it at him.
Like, it is like the dismantled gun that he really likes. It's like he took all the parts of it off and just kind of gave Han like the remnants of the gun. Yeah.
Well, I think that it's a nice touch though, because Woody Harrelson like takes like a longing look at it, like gives it a kiss. Like this is clearly like a very, and like to its point, that blaster model is really well known for being long-term use. Anyway, sorry. I digress. It fits. It fits the lore. Like it is a favored gun for a reason for a lot of different people in Star Wars canons.
Yeah, that just reminded me. I meant to ask last week, Cameron, what lightsaber technique Darth Vader was using in the end hallway scene of Rogue One.
That would be Jinso, I think is what it's called. It's a variant of Form 5. And it is particularly used for its like aggressive nature. It is an evolution of people who practiced Form 3, Suresu, the defensive form that Obi-Wan Kenobi regularly uses, which was developed to combat and repel blaster fire as a specialty. And Jimso's practitioners who felt like instead of waiting as a defensive measure to defend, you should attack, ready to defend, but try to push and create the openings that Suresu normally just defends against until it receives that opening. So the history of the lightsaber forms also follows the history of galactic warfare. Mm-hmm. So 1 is like a standard like sword fighting form. 2 is a dueling form meant to be against different lightsabers / vibroblades. And then Form 3 is created in order to and is a representation of the evolution of lightsaber combat in regards to how it deals with blasters being introduced to the galaxy as weapons. So, all
right. Well, thank you for the insight. I appreciate
You're
that.
welcome.
Like I mean, it definitely started out as like a dumb little jab at you, but I appreciate that you clearly do actually know the shit really, really well. So I can't make fun of that. I mean, I could make fun of that, but I won't.
You could. There's each form, by the way, has different nicknames. The Form 5 that Darth Vader uses is actually called form of Way of the Crate Dragon. So there you go.
That's that I get that reference. I understood that reference. Yeah, I agree. I think there are just a lot of dumb little things in this movie there, Frank, that it's like, why did they do those? Why did they make those choices? Why did they do those things? We didn't need answers to some of those questions. It's like nobody's wondering that. Nobody was really wondering like why because like somebody's like, oh, that's why Lando refers to the Millennium Falcon as a her, as a she. It's because he knows L3 or what. It's like that's like nobody was asking that question. Nobody was like, why does Lando say she and her in reference to, like, that's just a common thing. People call ships, like, people personify ships. That's quite normal. My car for the longest time was sexy or whatever. So it's like, yeah.
He also he refers to it as a she before they even like get to the ship. He calls it her and she and whatnot. So it's still like that. Like I never understood that reference because I was like, I'm pretty sure that he calls it a her and a she as they're looking at it when the droid is like standing right next to him. Yeah. So I never understood that. I like the idea of it's like she died, but they took her core and put it into the Millennium Falcon. I love that idea. Mm-hmm. And that's why I like that idea of like, that's why there's always that tap. Like whenever Han goes into the cockpit, he always taps that section. It could easily just be like, yeah, that's a funny quirk pilot thing that pilots do. Mm-hmm. But it also has like, you could also consider it to have like a deeper meaning to it if you would like to.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. While you're there, Cam, what were some of your thoughts here on Solo? I think you've mentioned kind of in the past that you probably are maybe the hottest on it among us. So yeah, what do you think?
Man, I love this movie.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, I understand its flaws, but like when they announced we're doing a Solo prequel film, I said, we do not need this. We do not need this. I do not know like anybody who wants this. But then they're like, but it's going to be like a space cowboy heist kind of film. And I said, you know what? If that's what it is, that's what I'm expecting out of it. I walked in. I remember because this is actually the first time I ever went to. Did I see this? I think I saw this. Yeah, it's the first time I ever went to an Alamo. I saw this film, and it was like I walked away from this film feeling great about it. I know there's going to be a lot of people that are really disappointed with it because it has it has it has what I would call like fascia damage. If you like look at home damage, fascia, like the structure of this film is solid. It has like plot wise, it's solid. It works as like a point to point to point, like things do make sense as they go forward. The problems lie in with its fascia, in which case I would refer to like its emotional beats. Like there is a distinct lack of emotional beats happening for big chunks of this film. And I think the biggest crux of that problem, and I would agree with Logan about it, is the relationship between Han and Kira. I think that it is and it's actually the problem with the actual very beginning of this film. You start, and I'll just say it now. You start the film with Han running away from a job gone bad.
Actually, you start the film with a crawl that's not a crawl, as Logan pointed out.
Oh my god! Yeah, 45 seconds in, I was like, "What is this?" Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I didn't like the crawl without a crawl. I'll be honest.
Yeah,
I would have preferred just like
because an unnecessary rule that they put on themselves.
Yeah,
for like a movie, and then we're like, let's try to get out of that.
Yeah, my response to Logan, like, because he mentioned that, and I like immediately threw it on to start watching it, kind of in the background while I was working or something, and I was like, oh, this was very clearly written as a crawl. It has all of the features that we like have come to know from crawls of like some words are capitalized because they're the important things. And then it has that weird like 4-period ellipsis at the end that all the crawls have. And if you break it out into its like 3 screens, it's a little on the shorter side of a crawl, but it's still like pretty much the same framework of a crawl. So it's just like, yep, they wrote that, and then Rogue One came out and they're like, well, we're not doing crawls. And so they're like, well, we wrote this crawl, so we'll do this instead. And then it's like, you don't need that at all. It adds nothing to this movie except 20 seconds of runtime.
Yeah, I would say like, so after that crawl, that's not a crawl, but is a crawl. You have him getting out of a job gone bad. And I think that immediately starts things off with, like, this film is filled with missed moments. And a couple of things I also say is following up right after that, he meets Kira. This is our first time meeting her, and immediately it's like a big kiss. This is establishing they are in a relationship. At no like, my struggle with really like finding anything appealing about their relationship was they have a history, but we never experienced it. It's the same problem that you see in the other prequels films where they do a tell, don't show. Well, we've been together forever. And like, it's like, these are severe structural issues that the other prequel films had that we've talked about in way too much. I was trying to find a fancier word for that, but I can't think of one right now. And it is a big part of the show, don't tell. And they do that for the first chunk of this film, and it sets things up very poorly. And from there, it has these really great moments, these really brilliant shining moments, in my opinion. But after the end of the day, as a film, it's a fun space cowboy heist romp that does some fun stuff. I like that they include the Maw. For people who don't know, the Maw is a gravity well in Star Wars that... It is a gravity well that has several black holes around it that creates like a nebula of clouds around it. So it's like the fact that they were like, we're going to do this. It's a planet like in like right next to the Maw. It all this stuff. They're like talking about parsecs. Like it takes 20 parsecs. Like you have this distance you create, and it's completely setting it up for like what is essentially just like we can't make the distance because this stuff is like defrosting, I guess is the best way to put it. It's cooling down too much, and it plays up a lot of just like fun, cool things. It's got there's several moments of this that also feel like a little bit like a Fast and the Furious film. And
I agree, but not in a good way.
no, that's fair. I like
mean,
those elements.
it does I mean, not the opening that you kind of touched on already, Cam, but like, I mean, there is a car chase basically at the beginning to kick this movie off. So
oh yeah, for sure.
yeah.
When I saw that, I was like, this is very Fast and Furious.
Yeah, it is like a almost a more grounded movie at points. Like obviously, apart from really the Kessel Run, there isn't a lot in the way of like space battles and stuff like that. So yeah, it is pretty much like we get that heist, we get a train or we get the car chase, we get a train heist, and we get like some Wild West era shootouts and stuff.
We also get like 2 different con jobs going on, like con attempts going on.
Mm-hmm.
I like, there are several things that I like, don't care for, or I think, just like Logan said, could be like tweaked very heavily to make it a better movie. And I think a lot of that falls on what you touched on, Trevor. Ron Howard's just a safe pair of hands. He produced a film that was on the script and gave it to us and shot very well. At times, there are other times when it's not shot well because of what I believe to be editing decisions made to emphasize that this is Han's thing. Like, oh, this is Han's blaster that he gets. Let's take a while he's looking at it. Let's take a moment, just stop and look at it for like 5 seconds. When in reality, I think in the shooting of it, they probably didn't spend that long on it. It was like, yo, he catches the blaster. He has it. Moves on. Like, that was probably what was intended for it.
Yeah. I mean, there are definitely things like that where I'm just like, I remember outside of like the Star Wars Battlefront games, never thinking like, oh, that gun of Han's is so iconic.
Here's the thing. I had like laser tag guns growing up as a kid that were the Star Wars ones, and that's the blaster that you got with it for one side of it, the Rebel side.
Yeah, I mean, I don't doubt that it's like iconic within the context of Star Wars or whatever, but it's, I mean, like when you put that up against like lightsabers and stuff like that, those are very clearly more iconic weapons versus a gun-like thing. I mean, like we touched on.
You're fair.
We touched on back when we did the Last Jedi discussion. Like the issue was there wasn't like iconic props or things that Han Solo had, so they had to rely on the dice to have this like moment between Luke and Leia. And I mean, because like Han is an iconic look, and it's like that. It's the vest, and it's like we know what Han Solo is, and it's like how he moves. It's not about what he has compared to like a lightsaber of a Jedi or something like that. So
I would say the biggest thing, like the only thing Han has that is like that is the Millennium Falcon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that's it. Like that's the only thing. That's the only possession of his that's like that broadly iconic that says when you see it, you say Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
But I think to kind of wrap up my thoughts on it are, I really love this movie, but I love it because it is. I love what it is. I acknowledge what it could be, and I'm very sad that we missed out on it. On what it could have been, but at the same time, I don't know if. Actually, let me rephrase. Let me kind of take a step back here. What this film could have been much worse in a lot of ways. I think the fact that it is shot well, I think the fact that it is acted well, like I think I like Emilia Clarke as an actress in films, but I just don't think that she has been put into positions that I don't think are like good roles for her. As far as like, and I'm directly referencing Terminator Genesis.
It's awful. It's so bad, that performance.
And that's just a
and
bad
it's
film.
not even her fault necessarily. Yeah, it's just like
it's just a bad film. She's the wrong casting for Sarah Connor completely.
Yeah, 100%.
No, like, and that's the thing. Emilia Clarke is, in my opinion, like when she does small bits of action, it's fine. But when she and when like, and this is the problem. It's not even that Kira and Han, like the actors and actresses, don't have like chemistry. Like they clearly have a fun time talking to each other and working with each other. But for me, it's these characters are written to have a puppy dog love, and also like there are scenes where it's like Han is getting kind of like heated about like, like almost possessive of Kira in a lot of ways, and like that just doesn't fit with Han Solo. it doesn't fit. Well, that's not true. It doesn't fit with Han Solo and women. Fits with Han Solo and like the Millennium Falcon.
I mean,
and
even that, like, I would disagree to a degree because, I mean, like, we don't experience a lot of that with Han Solo, but we do get him giving, like, jealous side eyes to Luke when Luke and Leia have moments in the original trilogy. So, like, I think there is a hint of that there. We just,
oh, sure,
again, it's not at the forefront of any of those movies. It is a subplot compared to, like, Han Solo's relationship with Kira is a driving force of this film kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I would say on the other flip side of that is he shows jealousy for sure, but his reaction to being jealous is being petty and making snide remarks. It's not like getting like almost aggressively possessive at times. And I feel like that was done to give an emphasis of like he sees her as like this is his girl, and which is fine, but it just doesn't work with Han Solo. I honestly, and this is a big change that I would have made, is I would have just made them like childhood friends, that there is kind of like a romantic like note to their friendship and relationship, and like thoughts of what quote unquote could have been if they had stayed together, like on Corellia, or if she had come with him. I think there's a lot of different things they could have done differently to like set that up as like making this not a, hey, we used to be together, but we've spent 3 years apart, and like, aren't we? Like, that was not entertaining to watch. That wasn't fun to watch. It wasn't fun to watch these two actors play in. Because that's just like an awkward, it was basically a prolonged awkward situation that propelled the plot forward in certain points. Yeah. Which just wasn't fun or interesting. And was counter to what a lot of the rest of the film was, which was, for me, exciting. I love Harrison Ford, Danny Newton. I like the entire criminal element of this
Woody
film.
Harrelson?
I love. What did I say?
Harrison Ford.
Harrison Ford.
Sorry.
I was like,
Woody Harrelson.
When you like segued into Danny Newton, I was like, wait, why did you bring up those two in conjunction?
Yeah, no, my apologies. Yeah, so like I love Woody Harrelson as like this kind of like I like that Han like he begrudgingly comes to like really like Han, and then things take a rough turn when his partner dies. Well, both of his partners, like both of his crewmates die, and he's just left with Han and Chewie. And but I like that there is always this like it always feels like he's a reluctant mentor in a lot of ways, because he's always saying this like lesson you need to learn, get like lots of really great things and like mentorship things that it's clear in the next decade Han would integrate into his own kind of like pattern of speech instructions. Like I'm being cocky here, fits the bill. Like it is very much like this is a guy who deeply inspired him, and I personally felt that throughout the film. I know other people, I remember reading and hearing other people say that they didn't feel that. But I think the biggest crime this film commits is how Han Solo got his wardrobe. Or it's like how Han got this, how Han got that, and it's not focused enough on this is the story. These things are incidental and happen throughout it. And once again, it goes back to those weird editing choices of giving too much focus on things that don't need focus on. That 100%. Are I mean, let's face it. Like I love the scene where he goes, "Now this is the last lesson I'm going to teach you." Get shot. Like that's such a good moment, because it's like, A1 Han shot first. Like that's such a great like nod to that. But then on top of it, it's also, I've learned everything I need from you. And he gives him props. He goes, you made the right decision. And it's like, it's so great on so many levels that I really, really enjoy. But I also know that's just deeply personal for me. I love space cowboy films. I love cowboy films. I love space, like roguish adventures. I love, like this checks so many boxes for me just on content of what I like what I love, that there's no way I'm coming out of this movie being like super jaded about it. Like, so needless to say, I'm definitely the hottest out of all of us on this.
I mean, Cameron did a lot that I want.
Sorry.
Yeah.
But like, yeah. No, like the immediate thing that I think is that I think I also love cowboy movies. Like I love westerns, and I love like a space cowboy adventure. Because that's ultimately what Star Wars is. Like Star Wars is just a space western at its heart, and I think the problem is that, at least for me, like I can only speak for myself, like this is just not an interest in one a lot of the times, right? Like I think it gets in its own way a lot of the times, right? Like I think this is a movie that prevents itself from being great. But then I also sit here and wonder, like, I think this is maybe the single Star Wars film that has the narrowest band in terms of what it can be, right? Like Cameron referenced, like, this could have been a lot worse, this could have been a lot better. And I kind of go, like, I don't know, like, I think this movie was never going to be, like, awful. It was always going to be, like, fine at the worst, and it was going to be, like, really good at the best. Like, I don't think this movie ever could have been, like, excellent, and I don't think it ever could have been, like, terrible. Like, I think it had a really narrow band it was going to sit in. It's going to be a 6 or a 7, maybe an 8 kind of thing for me, just because, like, there's so much built into this. And whereas, it's going to be the comparison to make. Like Rogue One, I think, was partially freed in its sense of being a prequel because its main focus wasn't any hugely important character. So they could be really bold and they could be really innovative and risk-taking in terms of what they did with that story and what they did with the characters. This one, I mean, you're taking on one of the probably 3 most famous characters in all of Star Wars. I mean, at the worst, like one of the 5 most iconic characters in Star Wars, right? You're replacing probably the most famous actor to ever be in Star Wars in Harrison Ford, in terms of what he did outside the series. And so there's a lot baked into that expectation. And I think most people are going to come out and be like, it's good, to, it wasn't for me, it was fine, to, yeah, I really liked it. It's not my favorite, it's not the worst kind of Star Wars movie. Like, I think that was just always going to be its fate. And I think we've talked a lot about Ron Howard and the direction he took this film in terms of it being safe. I don't think there was any choice, like, in terms of the direction he gave. Like, I think when they brought him on, they said, this is what you're going to do. Are you okay with that? Yes or no? Right? Like, I think, especially after the mess they'd had in their eyes with Lord and Miller, they were very clear about what they wanted with the direction. And so I think Ron Howard came in and said, I can do that. I also can do really big things. I think Ron Howard actually, at times, is a really, like, risk-taking director, right? Like, I think there's a lot in a lot of his film history that suggests that he can do really, like, risky, bold, cool things. I just think that he was given nothing to work with. I think they said, this is what we're going to do, period. We don't really want that much deviation with it. And I think you see a lot of that in the editing choices that Cameron, I think, really smartly pointed out. Like, I don't think Ron Howard necessarily had a ton of, leeway in terms of the edit. And I think they wanted to emphasize the Han Solo-ness of this movie, and Ron Howard just kind of was along for the ride a little bit, right? Like, I think those are all of the biggest mistakes, right? Like, I agree with Cameron 100% on that, right? Like, they just got in their own way, right? Like, I think the reference I gave to Trevor earlier in the week when we talked about it before or after recording News You Care About was, it's another James Bond reference, if you will pardon me, right? Like, Die Another Day, for the 40th anniversary of James Bond, made a whole big thing about how they're going to make a reference to every single James Bond movie that had come out before it, right? It was the 20th movie, 40th anniversary, let's go, boys. And they ended up being really heavy-handed, and they ended up being really in your face and ham-fisted and like, hey, here's a room of just, like, props from, like, 9 movies. Let's just tick off the movies that we did here, right? Like, there was no subtlety in it, right? Whereas Skyfall, which came out on the 50th anniversary and was this amazing celebration and also deconstruction and subversion of James Bond and its mythology and its character and everything, went about its references to the kind of idea of James Bond way more smartly and way more clever. And I think Solo took the Die Another Day approach of, like, here is a blaster that, like, doesn't really matter because it's just a blaster and, like, Han Solo's weapon is not, it's just a gun, whatever. But, like, here it's a blaster and here's a 3-minute just freeze frame on the gun as it gets, like, into his lap. And, like, here are the dice and here's a meaning, and it's actually even weirder than you thought it was already. Like, and that's great. And, like, here's the outfit, and here's the outfit that, like, Beckett's wearing, that, like, Lando's gonna wear in Return of the Jedi. It's a whole big thing. Like, and it's like, I don't need, and, like, even really weird stuff, like, they gave like the background on Chewbacca's name, like, on, like, his nickname. It's like, I didn't need how he came up with Chewie for Chewbacca. It's pretty self-explanatory. Like, that's not, like, it's a little long for me. It's like, what are you talking about? There are people who have, like, 35 letter names in Star Wars. Like it's fine. Like it's also Chewbacca Chewie. I get it. Like it totally makes sense. I don't need anything for that.
There was a Chirrut Imwe in the last film. It's like I remember that being a thing when Rogue One came out. This idea of like, why have Star Wars names gotten so weird compared to Luke, Han, and Leia? It used to be pretty simple, and then they've just kind of gone, off the deep end and
there were like certain ones that had like Chewbacca and Yoda had weird names, sure, but like even Obi-Wan was Ben for I mean, realistically, like most of the original trilogy, they just called him Ben. So it's like, like it's cool to like have them have like space names, but like Chewbacca's name is Chewbacca. We know Chewbacca. We know he's called Chewie. That's like saying like, my name is Johnny. I'm going to call you John. It's like, yeah, of course you are. That's what you would do with my name if you shortened it down. Like, I don't need any backstory on that. And like, it's just, they did so many things. I'm just like, Frank, I think, said it really well. Just like, I didn't have any questions about any of this stuff, and you're giving me answers. And then like, the questions you do bring up that I like am curious about, you don't really answer. Like, I think one of the biggest issues of the movie is that like, they clearly thought they were going to do another thing with these characters, because it just ends without an ending. Like it doesn't really just like, it just kind of happens, and it's like, oh, okay, there's a lot of loose ends here, and I kind of want to know what's happening here with these characters. And I think it had the misfortune of being the 24th biggest movie in the world that year, and coming off the heels of a very divisive movie beforehand, and a movie that had an even more lukewarm reception probably, and also didn't do great at the box office in Rise of Skywalker. And so just kind of like, we're just gonna not do movies for a little bit, we're just gonna focus on TV. And it's like, cool, I guess this is just the ending we're gonna get then for this. And so I think so much of the issues of Solo can kind of be traced back to the fact that its production was a mess, and I think that's reflected in the movie we get, right? Or like, it feels kind of all over the place at times and a little disjointed, and I think
80%
that's unfortunate. Yeah, that's crazy, right?
That's insane.
And like, that's the problem. Is that like they just give it no chance? Yeah.
Yeah, 80% of that film is reshot, which means like that to me that is just,
they replaced the villain of the movie with a different actor.
Yeah.
Which is wild, because what was Omar's interpretation of that guy?
Right.
Because we got a very Paul Bettany like villain. Who the hell was this guy before?
Yeah, I mean, like it's even that, like, I mean, there, especially in in the aftermath of like the Snyder cut and whatnot. It's like I'd certainly be curious about the Lord and Miller cut of this movie, but we're never going to get that because Disney's never going to play ball like that.
Well, it's also, who's to say it's like, if it made everybody at Disney shit their pants out of fear, like maybe it wasn't great.
I mean, I think there's a very different, like, even a few years ago, Disney was a very different kind of beast. Like,
Sure.
I mean, because this is like not, immediately after, but it's pretty much in the same era of like, Edgar Wright had been working on Ant-Man for years and years and years, and then they replace him, and they end up replacing him with Peyton Reed, and Ant-Man finally comes out, but you can kind of still see hints of Edgar Wright's work in it, but it's
Ant-Man's great.
Well, he didn't shoot 80% of the film,
right. But it's that same kind of thing of like, they didn't necessarily have like full faith behind these weird people, but then like, since then you get like Taika Waititi, and everybody, like, Thor Ragnarok blows up and everybody loves it, and so they're like, all right, well, yeah, let's let our people get a little weird, let's let people do weird things with Star Wars. Maybe we're getting a freaking anime Star Wars series later, like in a month or two or whatever, with Star Wars Visions.
It's
like
it I'm so excited, like, to I don't think I've been on anything since that announcement the other day. But man, oh man, did I just like watch that over and over and over again? Did you be like, okay, this studio's doing this one, this studio's doing this one?
Yeah.
I'm so stoked. Like, it looks wild, bonkers, and weird, and I am here for it 1000%.
Yeah, it's like, you bring Lord and Miller on, I think they were largely getting, work based off of like, everybody really loved the Lego movie, and the Lego movie did really cool things with like a thing that should not have been as good as it was. And then, fortunately, I guess, because they got pulled off this, they were able to kind of put a little bit more eyes and focus on Spider-Verse, and we get Spider-Verse, which sure didn't do great, financially, but it wins the Oscar for animated movie that year and is like universally beloved. Just not enough people saw it. And I don't remember what
it's my niece's favorite movie. She's 5. It's her favorite movie.
It's my favorite movie. I'm 36.
Yeah. That's the spectrum. My niece
yeah.
who loves like unicorns and like that sort of stuff. Her favorite movie, if you ask her, she'll say Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
So
it's, I mean, like,
the movie's amazing.
If like it really, for me, and this is kind of what I talked with Logan about a little bit when we were going back and forth earlier in the week, is like this strikes me as Lawrence Kasdan was basically like, I wrote Empire and Raiders of the Lost Ark, don't fuck with me. And
kind of, yeah.
And like, he's missed a step. Like, Force Awakens from a storytelling point wasn't the greatest. And this, as I think we can all kind of agree, has a lot of issues. So like, this isn't a great film, like script wise, but he was so set in his ways and has enough sway because of his CV that like the higher ups at Star Wars and people got behind it because they weren't fully bought in and fully sold on Lord Miller doing. I mean, basically, like what I think they've kind of come out and been like was, well, we would do what, you know, we would film what Kasdan wrote, but then we'd do a few extra takes and a few extra shots of, you know, people ad-libbing and going and kind of playing around with it and stuff like that. In the same kind of like it compared to like, I remember Ragnarok before, like years before that film came out, stories being like only 20% of the Ragnarok script is scripted. Like 80% of that movie was improvised and stuff like that. And everybody was like, this is going to be terrible. And like at the end of the day, it's not. You can very clearly kind of tell what the scripted parts of that movie are because they're the parts that are setting up like the next movies and stuff like that. They're the parts that needed to get you from point A to point B. But like Taika Waititi had a vision and had fun with it, and the cast and crew bought into that vision in a way that they didn't with Star Wars. But I think they could have, especially in a Han Solo story. I think you could have had a lot more fun with it than they do in this. Mm-hmm. I want to go back to, you said, Frank, this idea that like this is basically a mediocre, maybe this was you, Logan, a mediocre version of, or a mediocre episode of Mandalorian. I think it was you, Frank, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, like it, and to the whole notion of like this is a space western. Like this was, at least in my interpretation, the most space western that we'd seen of Star Wars. Whereas like the rest of Star Wars up to that point was space samurai film, which yes shares elements of western, but I think part of that is because of lightsaber duels and stuff, you're going to frame shots in a very specific way. It's the difference between Ghost of Tsushima and Red Dead Redemption in terms of like the cinematics. Yes, both of them can have a lot of the same kind of standoff duel moments, but I remember seeing like the trailer the first time of like Han facing off against Enfys Nest and her kind of squad and being like, oh, that definitely like harkens back to Western imagery more than anything we'd seen. And I think The Mandalorian does a lot of that same thing, and very clearly, I mean, I made the joke at some point about like Jon Favreau finally made his idea for cowboys and aliens work. It just had to be in the Star Wars universe with The Mandalorian. And The Mandalorian does all of those cowboy Western like space opera elements so much better than this does. And a lot of it may be because it's a character we didn't know, it's a character we didn't care about, it's not tied to anything, it could be riskier. Talking about Rogue One, Rogue One gets to play with stakes in a way that this movie can't, because we know certain predetermined outcomes. We know Kira and Han aren't destined to be together, so we know that relationship is doomed to fail. Whether that happens in this movie or in some future movie that we're never actually going to get, like, we still know that was the case. We know that Han and Chewie are safe. Like, they're not going to go anywhere. They're going to be fine. We've never heard of any of these other people, so they're all maybe on the chopping block. But Han and Chewie are safe, and we just know too much about the future of this universe to make that to make the stakes worthwhile in this. We're never fearing for we're never fearing that Dryden Voss is actually going to kill Han in this. We're never fearing that Beckett's going to get one over on Han in that final scene. We know that like Han's going to win the day. So I think like the prequelness of this film suffers because of that in a way that Rogue One didn't, because it was a cast of unknowns effectively compared to what we, went in expecting.
And they all died.
Yeah. And again, like they didn't have to. The story could have played out a different way, but because we didn't know them, like the first time you're watching Rogue One, it's like, is anybody going to make it out of this alive? Everybody's life is at stake, and the galaxy's life is at stake. We like the one thing we know going out of Rogue One is that the mission succeeds. Like we know that they get the Death Star plans out, but how they get the Death Star plans out is tense all the way through because we like
how do they do it?
We don't know who's going to do it. We don't know how it's going to happen, and all the way through the hallway scene with Vader, it's like that baton is getting passed to the very last moment, and in a very cool and interesting way, and then leads obviously right into the next film.
I think one of the things for Rogue One too, just go like touch on that briefly, is the idea of them deliberately being really coy about when it takes place as well, right? Like I remember seeing so many stories about like them kind of shining about like, oh, it's not like necessarily right at the same time as like A New Hope, and kind of being a little bit coy about like when exactly it's syncing up with like just like, oh, it's like near A New Hope, but like not necessarily like the same day and like exact minutes behind kind of thing. And so like I think that led it to be really interesting the first time through too, of like get into that moment and realizing just how immediate it's in and is into the beginning of A New Hope, I think was a really surprising twist, right? Because you thought, oh, right, they're all dead. The plans made it out though. There'll be like a couple of days, weeks, maybe even at months. Like I don't know how long they're gonna have the plans for. Then it just keeps going basically. And like the movie almost ends where you think it's going to, and then there's like a whole like epilogue of like, no, it's still happening. They're still moving this along, and it is. They get it handed off, and then boom, we're in A New Hope now, right? And I think there's an element of even down to the timing of Rogue One, their ability to take risks with that, right, and kind of experiment with that. Where in this movie, they're just less able to do that, right? I think, right, like you can't have it take place like days before New Hope, because then people can be like, that's not Harrison Ford, right? Like even here, it's like this looks like the same age Harrison Ford is in A New Hope, but just kind of ignore that.
Forget
like
that
didn't age
forget
for 10
that this
years.
is 13 years earlier, and yeah,
it's like don't worry about that. But so they're just like less able to do things in that regard. And again, the fact that they are playing around with Han and Chewie, it's like, all right, well, these are two characters who are very well known, and so you both afforded less, I think, room to experiment. And then on the flip side of that is the fans who are going to come in to watch it have so many more built-in expectations and things, and there is a not insignificant block like me who are already saying, I don't really think we need this, right? And says, even if you're like me and said, I don't really think we need this, but like I'm excited to see it, there's still that initial built-in idea of just like, you have to convince me that it's even worth like existing almost, right, in some small way, right? And so that is also something you have to jump over, whereas in Rogue One it's like, this is a brand new movie about people I don't know, about an event that I don't really know that much about, right? And set in an indeterminate time period. So I'm just totally open for the ride. And this is something that is very different. And so it's just, there's so much working against this movie, both in terms of the production, both in terms of the story, both in terms of the larger Star Wars community and fans and universe. Like, it's very hard to pull off. And that's why I go back to the fact of like, no matter what they would have done, I just think there was a narrow band of like a 6 to an 8 that they were going to kind of fall in for the vast majority of people.
Yeah.
Outside of just like the community as outside forces, other films coming out, just being like
100%.
We talked about at the top of the podcast. Like we don't need to reiterate it, but or go back deeper into it. But to reiterate it in a summary is this had a very long uphill battle to climb. And it didn't necessarily make it all the way up that hill. So,
I mean, like, even in that context, like, you think about Infinity War coming out a month before this, and, like, Infinity War was a completely different beast and a completely different uphill battle, and succeeds on pretty much all fronts. Like it
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
the culmination of
I
20
think
plus
everyone would fine,
movies
actually.
or 19 movies or however many it was at the time in the MCU, coming to this thing that had been basically building up to this since the first Avengers movie back in 2012. So it was like 6 years in the making, 12 or like 10 if you want to go all the way back to Iron Man, versus this, which was, I mean, like it's fascinating because I feel like the narrative around this and Rogue One were largely the same when those ideas were announced, of like they're prequels. Like one is about, coming, like finding the plans for the Death Star. One is like a young Han Solo story. It's like both of them, I remember a general consensus, a not insignificant portion of the audience saying like, why do we, like, we don't need these things. Go to a different part of the galaxy, go to a different, like, tell different stories. And then it's almost weird because like Rogue One, I feel like maybe even gave like a glimmer of hope that, well, like Rogue One turned out really well. So maybe Solo can turn out really well too, if we didn't have that coupled with the troubled behind the scenes production elements of it. And like I said with Rogue One, I think there's an element of like how much our knowledge of that colors our ultimate takeaways from the movie. Like I imagine if I talked to my dad, who doesn't follow that kind of stuff, doesn't know any of that stuff, and he watched Solo, he'd probably be like, that was fun. I mean, like, he wouldn't really probably care too much that it's not Harrison Ford. He definitely wouldn't know that like 20% of this movie was shot by Lord and Miller and 80% was shot by Ron Howard. Like, I think that's an element that speaks to the broader general public, that there was maybe just kind of like with the Suicide Squad is like, the other a contemporary example where people didn't show up to see the Suicide Squad. Obviously in film, in theaters, but even, HBO Max numbers are seemingly down on people watching the Suicide Squad. And so maybe just the damage of the first movie and the reputation that had did hurt it enough that or it just doesn't have enough name recognition without Star Wars being like the first thing you're seeing on this. I mean, they definitely,
there's no episode attached to it.
yeah, they definitely do like hit you over and over the head that this is a Han Solo story, even with that kind of like Solo, hologram flying into the screen instead of the normal kind of intro and stuff. But it is a story outside of that. Rogue One, while it did well, also didn't do the Skywalker saga numbers, because people do have like an association to that story, in a way that breaking away from that and telling something outside of that isn't just like Star Wars. Just the broader Star Wars fan base hasn't gotten to it. I mean, a key point is thinking about like all the people who walk out of this movie being like, wait, I thought that guy died in Phantom Menace. Like, how is he back? Because those people didn't watch Clone Wars and don't know that, story of Darth Maul surviving and his whole like,
or Rebels, right? Like it's
yeah.
His story is told over 2 different animated TV shows, right? Like it's a really niche thing to bring this character back if you've just been watching the movies, which is like a not uncommon thing. Like you can be a pretty decent sized Star Wars fan, right, who just watches the movies but loves them and have no idea why the hell Darth Maul's back, right? Like it's pretty simple to just walk in and be like, this guy died 20 years ago, and like our timelines, it's like, why is he, and I mean even in their timeline almost 20 years ago at this point, right? So it's like, why is he back? He should be cut in half. And they do nothing to explain it. It's just like, again, it's just like a weird thing to like set up a movie that is never going to happen.
Yeah.
So it's just like, yeah, it's like, okay, I guess.
Yeah. Just weird stuff. So talking about any favorite moments or anything anybody wants to highlight, Frank, do you have anything you want to shed some love to on this?
Yeah, I kind of touched on it a bit before, but I do kind of like the heist. I do think it could have been done a little bit better, but like obviously, like I think it's kind of an entire cool sequence with like this entire train heist, and I like that they kind of like fly in up on it, But like, I had mentioned before when we were doing think it was Return of the Jedi. With it, it's like it's cool when they kind of go undercover in Jabba's palace and everybody kind of like they're doing an actual like operation and everybody has their roles. So like that's another cool thing I like to see like played out in like Star Wars. You know, it's like whether it's like, hey, we have a heist, we have a plan, we have like things we're trying like an operation we're trying to run and things we're trying to do. So that's something like I want to give a shout out to. Like it's just something but ultimately it kind of goes back to my point that like I think it could have been done better. I think like even the action could have been done better, and even it could have been more fun. And part of the thing that I don't love about it is like because like Beckett loses some of his crew there, but it's this moment to me where it's like I don't care about them. Like, you know, where like they
I just got introduced to you.
yeah, like but there's like Rogue One introduces characters that I care about like immediately, and even though they die at the end of the movie, it's like, or you know, you have a little bit more time with them. It's just this thing of like, yeah, there are these characters that are there that like I never particularly cared about, and then they get kind of like gunned down, and then I'm like, okay, but that could like I just think there's a lot of cool things that could have just been done a little bit better. But that's something I would give a shout out to because I think it's like ultimately one of my more favorite set pieces.
Yeah, I do think, or at least for me, like I like Favreau and Tandy Newton enough to like them and buy them in their roles, but they are dispatched a little too quickly. Like it is, oh, if we had if we had a successful heist with the crew,
Yeah.
and then things go wrong, then maybe
at the end of the movie
like,
kind of thing. Yeah.
But like we kind of like come in to their crew mid their first heist, like Han does, and yeah, we just don't get enough time with them. Like, I mean, and some of that is just like, I think it's funny the way Jon Favreau says Wookiee, and Tandy Newton is just like a really badass actress, but like I'm also I can also be very mindful that I'm bringing in like Westworld into my enjoyment of her performance in this, and I think because she gets so much more to do in Westworld. So I think there are elements of like, yeah, structurally, if we spent more time with the crew like we do in Rogue One, it would have made those deaths a little bit more meaning and a little bit more impactful, as opposed to, well, we gotta kind of dispatch with them so we can bring Kira and Lando on board. And I'm all for bringing Lando on board, but Kira is the weird, like, I mean, other people have kind of mentioned, like, she doesn't necessarily have the greatest element from a plot point. Like, they very clearly bring up the idea that, well, the Pikes don't know us, so we can do this for you. We can go in this, and it won't affect you. And then Dryden Voss's response is, well, let me send you my top lieutenant to to make sure that things go right. It's like, yeah, but also your top lieutenant directly ties you to this mission and this operation. So you like the whole thing you were just trying
He's
to
not
resist.
a smart criminal. Yeah.
Like just immediately like falls apart. And it's just like that's one of those things that I didn't think about that necessarily the first time or two I watched it, but I definitely thought about it this last time of like, wait, like you just made this whole thing about how you can't do this, and they had to kind of like talk you back from killing them by saying, no, your hands will be clean of this, and you immediately dirty your own hands by insisting Kira go on this. It's like, oh, that's just bad writing. That is a bad plot structure from the Kasdans there. Adding that in, like, take away some of those like complications or something and find another way to get Kira on board if you really need Kira on board. But also I would argue you probably don't really like,
yeah,
you can
totally.
you can use her to get the introduction to Lando, but she isn't really needed on the mission apart from like, you ultimately end up getting like a little bit of a sight gag of like her being Han's co-pilot and then not knowing how to fly a ship at all. And so you finally get like the hero shot of Han and Chewie together on the Falcon. And that's like that and the Terrace Kasi thing, but like none of that needs to happen. You could have left her completely on the sidelines and then they're waiting for Voss when she gets back. And I don't think structurally you would have lost too much on the film. So it is definitely a weird element that, hey, yeah, if Tandy Newton had been in there, like she had survived and continued on and then dies on that mission somewhere along the line, along with L3, then maybe we care a little bit about those characters more because we spend a little bit more time with them. But the way it is structured, we don't. And so it loses some of the potential impact it could have had.
And to even your point there, like I even care a little bit more about losing L3 like later in the movie. And I know, like, I don't know how you guys feel about that, but that for me is like, it's not like this crazy moment I'm gonna cry over, but that even was like a more emotional moment for me, where I was like, oh, this is a character I actually thought was a little bit more fun and like I liked. And then like I do kind of like, since we're talking about our favorite moments, I kind of like the uprising and like causing a distraction. Like that's just kind of like fun, you know. And but
When the
also
walker droid goes across the keyboard, it's great. Love that moment.
yeah, like there's a lot of like fun things and like we even just weird comedy in there, and like it's also a really good distraction. But that's another thing though that where I'm like, that's just a whole thing where it's like, I mean, you could also just not have any of that.
Mhm.
You know, there's just, you could just do a Han Solo movie with and still have some of these elements and just totally write it in a completely different way and get to the same endpoint. But I think just have like a stronger movie with more fun action and like better characters, and even using the same characters, you could just use them more effectively than I think we get a lot of the time.
Yeah. I think, I mean, with L3 in particular, compared to like Val, like L3 fighting for robot droid rights or whatever, like is introduced with more character than we get from Val, really. Like Val is and part of that is because of like the stoic mercenary trope or whatever, and like she's her relationship is more with Beckett, and Beckett isn't going to show when he's sad or when he's torn up about her dying, really. Like, yes, we can kind of see it very subtly compared to like Lando being a more emotional wreck, and when L3 dies, like a lot of that again comes down to performances and character types, I think, than anything else. But it fuels into why L3 maybe is a more impactful death than Val was. And also Val goes out on her own terms, essentially, by blowing
Yeah.
the bridge, versus L3, who gets, shot amid her revolution. But yeah. Anybody else favorite moments?
I'll go. Alden Ehrenreich. I think he's fantastic. I really, really, really loved his what he does with Han. I love that. I'm really sad that we are never going to really get the. I think this movie is a part of why like classic roles don't really get to be recast going forward in Star Wars, which is a shame because we could still explore some really great stories otherwise. But I think that he does a phenomenal job. Like I think that the problem is that comes back to Han as a main character, the structural issues with that, as well as the fact that like he spends a good chunk of that movie being a jealous puppy dog at certain points. But I will say I like one of my favorite scenes is right after he's killed his like pseudo mentor. He like his mentor's proven right. Kira takes the ship and goes, and he just like looks on like I love that moment because it is a moment where the universe has proved like Han wrong. The Han that we'd seen throughout this film proved him wrong and gets him on a path of where we end up getting to see him, and I enjoy that. I like that a lot. His like his chemistry with all the different parts, all the different people he interacts with. I love him with Lando. Him and Donald Glover as Lando and Han. From the moment he goes, Han, it's Han. Whatever. Like just that, like from the moment that starts, I love his like Wookiee language noises. I love his like I am enamored with his performance in this film. And I think a lot of one of the reasons why I get carried through this film a lot better than most people is because I just buy into this is Han Solo. And because I buy into it so hard, it definitely gets me through a lot of probably rougher spots that other people don't get through unscathed. But I also like, I love everyone's like, his thing is he wants to be a pilot. It's like, kind of, but it's also about like what that represents to like a surface stuck kid growing up in the gutters. There's a whole thing to it that I think reminds me a lot of. It's funny. It does remind me a little bit of Vaughn from Final Fantasy 12. My motivation is I want to be a sky pirate.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I'm gonna be a pilot, but I like it because of what it represents. Like it's clear that being a pilot represents something very special to Han.
I mean, yeah, his whole thing is,
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't care who he's allegiant to. He just needs to fly. So he's perfectly content to sign up for the Imperial military if it means he can be trained as a pilot and get out of there. And then that goes awry, but he's still so dead set on being a pilot that he joins up, with Beckett's crew and like makes his way into it and figures his way out. But it was like he had no problem being with the bad guys basically to fly, to get off of Corellia, to get out of there and see the stars. Yeah.
Oh, I think on top of that also, there's that awesome moment between Lando and Han where they're talking and Lando and Han's like, this is this kind of cruiser. And Lando goes, oh, your ships. He goes, and he goes like, it sounds like you've been in one before. He goes, I have, but not like this, but it's like this very poignant moment between Han and Lando where he goes, yeah, my dad was worked in a shipyard before they laid him off.
Mm-hmm.
Were you close with your father? Is this like a character that should be more depth into? No, not really.
Because earlier in the film when he was asked who are your people, he said I've got no one. And so that's why he's stuck with the name Solo. Yep. And then we find out an hour later, wait, you did have people. You had a dad that you reminisce about.
You had a dad, but also it's this, that whole thing is also the weird emphasis on later films about last names, which has never been a thing in Star Wars.
Yeah.
It's just it bothers me so much. I hate it in this movie, and I've been panning that moment and joking about it for years. And then in Rise of Skywalker at the end, when she's just like, last name, I'm like, why are people so fucking obsessed with last names in this universe?
And why is it only now? It never was a pro. There's a character
Yoda.
named Bosk.
What is your last name, Yoda? Tell us.
Yoda. What's your last name? Bosk, lizard man
the most
who has
powerful
no lines.
Jedi in the entire universe.
Chewbacca. What's your last name?
Cool.
It's
nobody asked
perfectly
Chewbacca's
fine
last
that Chewbacca doesn't have a last name in this film.
Which, by the way, I really
Also,
love the Wookiee Han moment, the Chewbacca Han moments, because it just helps build up this friendship throughout the film. Are there dumb moments like Chewbacca? That's too long. I'm going to give you a nickname. Definitely don't need that nonsense. But when he's when Chewbacca's going to help his people and he says wait, and gives him the taser staff, and then afterwards Beckett's like, where's Chewbacca? And he goes, he had something to take care of. It's like, is he coming back? And there's that moment where he pauses, he goes, I don't know. And it's sad. There's this moment of I don't know if he is coming back. We didn't talk about it. He just went to help his people. And then Chewbacca shows back up and is just not going to leave you behind, but we're in this together. And it's this really awesome moments that I really center around Alden Ehrenreich, who I'm saying his name wrong. I can't pronounce his last name to save my life.
Ehrenreich.
Ehrenreich. Yeah. Ehrenreich and Harrison have great moments. Everybody he interacts with, I love the chemistry that they build together. Outside of him and Kira,
Mm-hmm.
which is when they're being passive and fun and jovial and not romantic, love that. When they're being romantic, doesn't feel right, doesn't look right, just doesn't come off correctly, or not correctly, I shouldn't say that, but doesn't come off well. So there's my really, he's my takeaway from it is all those moments that I just named all have to do with just him. He is my highlight of this film.
Yeah.
So.
Real quick, one of the things you mentioned early on there, I want to just touch on, then I'll throw it to you, Logan, if you have any favorite moments among the rest of the film that you want to give some love to. But when you mentioned, Cameron, the shot of Kira leaving and the universe proving Han wrong, I immediately thought that's the moment when Han goes from I've got a really good feeling about this to being the guy that we will forever associate with I've got a bad feeling about this. Yeah. Any moments from you, Logan?
I have 10 things wrote down that are things I like and dislike, and these are all just quick kind of blurbs. just mainly because Cameron said this, I immediately put it as my first note. Yeah, I mean, like, I always thought the idea of recasting the core characters is bad. This movie doesn't necessarily prove it on its own, but, like, I think it's an example of, like, just don't recast the core character. Just, like, we have those movies, we have those stories. It is always going to be a lose-lose, I think. You're just always going to not make people happy when you do it, and there's no point to do it, right? Like, Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, Harrison Ford gave great performances. Those 3 movies are iconic. You're just gonna hit a hornet's nest with it. Just don't even do it.
I think they
and
could,
also because, like,
I think the
and
fandom would
because, like,
be behind Sebastian Stan as a Luke Skywalker in a post Jedi kind of scenario.
maybe. I think part of the issue is that, like you said, it's hard because only Luke is a main character, right? Like, in some ways, right? Like, Harrison Ford doesn't. I mean, Han Solo doesn't really work, and, like, even Leia, like, works, I think, well as, like, sort of this, like, antagonistic force, like, kind of pushing them to be better. And so, like, I wonder what that solo movie for her would look like, because it'd have to be presumably when she's young, like, in, like, the in between series, and so she's, like, a teenager basically. So that would be weird. And then also because now, I mean, with Carrie Fisher's passing, it's even more of, like, a weird thing to try to recast that. But I think it would work best if you wanted to do it to maybe do, like, Sebastian Stan in, like, The Mandalorian stuff. But even, like, a solo movie, I think, is just really risky. The next thing is, like I said, I've already said it before, so this is why it's just gonna be a quick thing. I don't really buy that he's Han. Again, I think that's, like, the worst part of the movies when I'm reminded that he's Han Solo. I'm like, I just wish you were just a cool smuggler dude. I don't need you to be Han. I think, like Trevor said, actually, I really agree with a lot of his stuff. It's because, in its own weird way, when they try to make Han more three-dimensional and more fleshed out, it actually makes that character less compelling, I think, in its own way, because he does work so well. Just like, I'm always cool. I'm, like, unflappable. When I do get, like, when I am kind of, like, startled, it's because of something, like, huge happening. And I think seeing a younger version of him that is more fleshed out, is, like, more of an actual person, weirdly enough, makes it less interesting to watch in its own way. I think Kira sucks. I mean, I just do not. I think the character is just, like, and, like, I don't think it's Emilia Clarke's fault by herself, but, like, I think she's just obviously the worst part of the movie in terms of the characters that we were presented with. I think, like, I don't agree with Kim on this aspect. Like, I think her chemistry with Alden, both as a romantic interest and as just, like, people who are on the same stage together, just never works. Like, I do not buy that chemistry. And they have the misfortune, again, of being, like, Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher have amazing chemistry, right? So this is the only other relationship I see with Han Solo have in the saga, and that one is really good and immediate, and this one is just less so. So I just think that she doesn't work with any of the other characters. Like, to me, Trevor touched on it, and I'm just going to build off of it. You could have removed her as a character from the whole movie, and I think it would have made very little difference. Like, I just don't think she's ever really given that much. Donald Glover is great. Yeah, I mean, Donald Glover is great. He's fun. I agree that his, like, Han and Lando's chemistry, it's great. It is routinely really fun and charming. I think they bounce off each other really well. I would have loved to see more with them. But I get why we don't have more, because we have to do, obviously, the great love story that we all love so much. I think the speaking Wookiee stuff was like, it's such a fine line between, like, being really cheesy to, like, working. I think I don't like when he first does it and he's, like, the guttural growls and that kind of thing, and, like, the subtitles are there. I don't need that. Once he's just, like, doing it and we don't need to hear him, like, growling back, I think it's fine. But yeah, I think it's maybe a little cheesy. I think Beckett's great. Beckett is maybe my favorite part of the whole movie. And we haven't actually talked, like, too much about him, but, like, I think Woody Harrelson is great in this movie. I think he gives, like, such a cool, like, layered performance, and, like, his twists and turns of, like, where he's kind of coming from, I routinely found really interesting. And, like, in some ways, I kind of wish this was just a Beckett movie, and we kind of had it be this anti-hero movie where, like, Han Solo comes in as, like, a secondary character, right? But this is Beckett's movie, and then it ends with Beckett dying to Han, right? Like, that is still the ending, but then it, like, ends there, and it's just Han going off like the Millennium Falcon doing things, right? We get this look of, like, maybe a darker Han, or like Han is a gunslinger. This is kind of the gunslinger's path. Sometimes is to strike another gunslinger down. But I think almost all of the big emotional beats that do work for me on a Beckett level, whether it's him and his old crew, which which I talked about. I don't think get that much moments at work, but the ones that do, I think, are, Beckett and Val giving each other like a kiss, or like hugging each other, or just being very coupley, basically. They're just small things that don't have a 5-second zoom freeze frame shot of, but like they work because of that. And I think Val's death and Beckett's reaction, I really enjoyed. Like, I think the shot of him at the two graves and then him just like immediately snapping and like punching Han in the face works really well. And it's done really quickly. And then he just has to kind of be done grieving, because he knows that otherwise he's going to be dead in 10 seconds, right? Like, he just has to kind of like process it and be done with it. And then, Dryden Voss makes a reference to like how sad it was, and it's totally hollow and meaningless. And Beckett knows that and just gonna be like, thank you, I appreciate that, right? So I really enjoyed Woody Harrelson's character and his approach to that, and I'd have loved to have gotten even more of him. I don't like any of the Corellia stuff. Just none of it works for me. That's a dumb planet. The dumb snake lug lady.
We don't need to talk about that. We can just move on. We can all agree that was something we didn't like.
Yeah, none of it was good.
I will.
Sure, was gonna
You're
say
gonna say you liked it.
I will say
I don't get it either, Cameron.
I will like the stupidity of Han thinking that, like, this is a thermal detonator. You clicked your tongue.
That's
like,
true. I did like that one.
I like that, but it's even that is like a misdirect of like, no, he knows that that's not going to go anywhere, but he's now got a thing and he can throw it through the window, which like will fuck these people up. Like, so I like that.
Yeah.
I like that there's like a layer to that plan that at the top level, it's a funny, dumb Han thing, but like it also gets him where he needs to be to get out of there to get his like moment to run. Like I like that. And I like the idea of a speeder chase on the planet.
Oh yeah.
And the Fast and Furiousness of it. I
just don't like the snake lady. That's it.
I don't know if
Snake Lady's awful.
if I like I don't like the like I'm gonna try and get the thing through here in this very tight place, and then he doesn't work. Like I don't like that element of it. I would have liked just a more straightforward car chase where they get away. But like that was the one of the few things I was going to bring up that we hadn't really touched on. But Logan gave me the opening with hating Corellia.
It's dumb. Like I already said, the movie just kind of peters out at the end, so I don't need to go back to that. Just kind of like ends. And the last two things are maybe the two big ones for a Han Solo movie. Solo is stupid. It's a dumb way that he gets a name.
Oh, 100%.
I'm just going to have like my 10 seconds on that. It's just really stupid. It doesn't work. Like we already talked about, no one gives a shit about last names at all. No one has ever cared. And then in these two movies that in the Star Wars run, they're all about them all of a sudden. And it's weird. And this one in particular is like even dumber because it's just like Solo. And like the Imperial officer's like so clever for coming up for that one. He's like, just like, oh man, I'm the smartest guy in the room right now. I just came up with Solo for one person by himself with no family. Shout out to me.
Yeah.
It's like, it's dumb. It doesn't work. Whatever.
That was what I said to you of it's the issue that we had with the prequels where like nobody told Lucas that some of those ideas were stupid. Like nobody told Kasdan that this was a stupid idea, and so they shot it and like forced it in, and it adds this like extra weird stupid layer that Han Solo is joining the Rebel Alliance by the end of A New Hope using the name that the Imperial Army gave him. Like and has continued to like
once he left the Empire.
It's like I hate that so much.
It makes it's a dumb thing to make a cool name, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
He could have just been named Han Solo. That could have just been his name.
We had never had any reason to doubt that his name was just Han Solo. We'd never had anything be like, oh, maybe it's like a hidden name. It's like, no, we've never thought that for a single second. It's just like, his name is Han Solo. That's what it is. And then for this reason, again, to Frank's point, like they gave us an answer to a question we had never asked or even thought about. And they were like, here you go. And no, like it's no one had asked for it, so no one wanted this. It's so bizarre. And then the last thing I just want to talk about, because it's my least favorite part of the entire movie, the Kessler one is terrible. I don't like it. I think it's really stupid. I think it's it's a bad answer to a question I didn't want. Like it's like and the problem with the Kessler run is that I think there was no good answer, right? Like I think it's a little bit like what's inside the briefcase in Pulp Fiction, right? Like no matter what the answer is, it's not going to be as cool as what you kind of dreamed up in your head, right? Of like what the Kessler Run is has been like such a mythologized thing after 40 years, 45 years, right? And so I think to actually see it, no matter what it is, it wasn't going to work. I think certainly for me, and I think other people. And then to see what we got, it was just kind of like, oh, okay, like I don't like this interpretation of it, of what it is, right? And I think that is sort of the Kessler Run, I think, is my least favorite part of the movie because it goes back to the core element that I think is the weakest part of this movie, which is the problem with doing a prequel story for Han Solo is that Han Solo's cool. And so inevitably when you peel back and go to see how he got some of these things and how he met some of these people and how he became who he is, it's going to conflict with the ideas you came up with in your head. And they're inevitably not going to be able to live up to that because they can't, because they don't have any of what you think about, right, in your mind and your imagination. And so when you see it, it's like, oh, okay, it's just he got a dumb name from an Imperial officer, or like, oh, okay, like he got these dice that I didn't care about anyway from his ex-girlfriend, and like, oh, okay, like these are all weird things that he like became who he is. And so I think that's sort of the big reason. Also because it's just stupid. I don't think it's executed well either, but also the larger problem.
All of those things make him significantly less cool when Harrison Ford is playing him now. Like when we go back and watch the original trilogy, we have to be like, oh, that's right. His name is Han Solo.
It's a fake last name.
Because an Imperial officer gave it to him when he was like 13 years old or whatever he's supposed to be at that time.
And he was too lazy to change it. Yeah.
I liked it. I didn't like that that's the case. I think that it's I don't think that when I watch the movie. I think that like that never pops into my head.
I mean, it's not. Yeah, no, it's definitely not like an active thought or whatever. But if I do take a minute to think about it, I just go, why did they do that? That much like midichlorians, for example. It's like I'm not actively thinking about midichlorians when I watch the original, or when I watch the original trilogy. But like they're canon in this universe now, and they make those moments that much more stupid if you do like put any weight behind them, in the same way that like Solo will always be Solo now because of that stupid like line. Like I don't think I have any other moments to really highlight that we haven't touched on or anything like that, but I do think of my when I think of Solo, I think of the idea that like one of the few Legends stories I had ever read growing up was the Han Solo like prequel trilogy, basically. And it was when I was like in 7th, 8th grade or something like that. So I definitely don't remember it, and I don't remember like beats to this day. But like I'm starting here, I remember he had a rough upbringing and stuff like that, and he was an orphan kind of kid that was brought up in on military ships and stuff like that, and kind of like escaped, and then eventually meets Chewie. And I don't remember if the trilogy goes into like the Kessel Run. I feel like it did. I feel like that was a pivotal enough thing in his life that like the third book was maybe dedicated to a chunk of that or something. But it's one of those like that story canon at the time or whatever in the extended universe like didn't make me like think less of Han. I remember like reading it and being like, oh, Han is so much cooler, and it did a good job of fleshing him out over 3 books and stuff like that, whereas this just doesn't. This everything this does just makes him a less interesting character. And maybe if they had committed to, we're going to make 3 movies, we're going to make a Han Solo trilogy of films where he is going to end up like facing off against Darth Maul. And even though we know, because of how Darth Maul's, story ends with in Rebels or something, like we know that that's not going to, we know the stakes there are limited as well, but maybe he still like faces off against him or something like that. And that gives him a cool moment in this. Like there was a possibility that Solo over the course of these movies could have been made well, but they botched it kind of out the gate and then never got a second
Yeah.
shot to try and like do better. And I think
Mhm.
that like it will always have suffered because of that. And I don't know if they, had stayed close to, those original stories in the extended universe, if that had been a better thing. I think there's a significant portion of the audience, I think, like you, Logan, of like, don't ever just don't tell stories with those characters. And I think that sucks from a storytelling perspective, because I think you could tell more interesting characters. I think it is possible, and I think you are robbing yourself of telling cool stories by just saying don't ever recast those roles. And that just like is unfortunate. It's, another, not a good example, but like going back in time and telling, the Dumbledore Grindelwald story could have been really cool. And Jude Law as a young Dumbledore or something is like a cool casting choice and could do really interesting things. And I don't think like you're so locked into, well, Dumbledore's always got to be 150 years old or whatever it is. So I think it's possible to tell stories, but I think the fandom is too possessive over these stories that Alden Ehrenreich was always set up to fail, and that's unfortunate. Because I agree with Cam. I think he does a lot of good things in this role, and I think he's very interesting. And it's unfortunate that so many people were never going to even give him a shot because he's not Harrison Ford.
I would also.
I
Sorry,
think-
I just had a very, very cool realization just now. That's actually less cool and really, really sad. Actually, now that I think about it, we had an opportunity to see these Star Wars like original trilogy characters become characters in fiction, like Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes has been played by dozens of different actors in tons of different situations and stories that have been told over the years.
James Bond, to give Logan a shot.
And James Bond's another great one. Like, you have
We'll
iconic
get to that in a
fictional
second. Yeah,
characters that it is not really like, does it matter who plays that character? Yes, but there is a suspension of disbelief that this is a character larger than the actor themselves, that they can be passed down as a role to different actors. And because we are so locked in and, like Trevor said, so possessive as a fandom, that we don't get to enjoy a future of that in Star Wars fiction, at least not anytime soon.
Yeah, like we were cool with. We're cool with, and fortunately, he's getting another shot. Obi-Wan Kenobi being Ewan McGregor, that was given a pass. Given, I guess, in particular, the eras that was taking place in, and obviously you can't get Alec Guinness to come back and play those roles in the prequels era and stuff like that. But it's just something that always bugs me. It's the kind of thing, like, I think we touched on a little bit maybe with Rise of Skywalker. Like, it's tragic that Carrie Fisher passed before Rise of Skywalker could be shot and filmed, and I would have much rather seen them cast somebody else in that role to finish out Leia's story than be so slavishly beholden to having Carrie Fisher play that role that they had to dig up unused footage from other movies and stuff like that. I think that was the absolute wrong call. And yes, maybe the absolute right call would have been just the character passed away off screen or something in between movies, and we don't experience that at all. But I don't like. It's one of those, like, it's unfortunate if it were me in a role like that, like putting myself in Carrie Fisher's shoes or something. Like, I would want what's best for the character, not what's best for my legacy. And that's what I think of in that regard, in my, in my former life as an actor and stuff. And obviously I've never had a role that, profound and stuff like that. But I think that was another instance of this, of just, she passed away and immediately people were like, you can't recast her. And it's like, that's like, you are robbing yourself of opportunities if you're immediately saying that only Carrie Fisher can play Leia. I just don't think that's fair to the storytellers that want to tell stories in the Star Wars universe. I mean, if you tell books, it's not like those characters are playing the book version of those characters or anything like that. So, and obviously in animation, we see many different actors taking on a lot of those different roles. because of the medium. So I don't think just because like the medium is staying the same in a live action film doesn't mean you can't recast those people. It's kind of my soapbox moment.
Yeah. I think my
gonna...
takeaway from that also might be, so Trevor and I both have acting in our background. It might just come from a legacy of theater as well.
I mean,
like
I won't even say that because I know there are absolutely actors out there that are so vain as to say like, no, nobody should ever play this role other than me. Like, so.
Well, yeah, but that's
there are those people, but Logan, you definitely want to respond.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to come at it from the other side in a different way, right? Like, I think I lean more towards not recasting the characters, both because, you know, I think these, I mean, because really we talk about recasting in Star Wars, we're essentially talking about Luke, Han, and Leia. Everyone else, I think, is pretty fair game, as we've seen with Obi-Wan Kenobi, like Trevor said. And I think, for me...
And Darth Vader.
I'm sort of opposed to... Yeah. I mean, God bless Gentle Jones. For me, I think it sort of comes down to it from the angle of, I want less of the things to begin with, right? Like, I'm someone who... I'm always, I think, a little leery of getting more of things I like, because I think I want to see cool new things be done, right? Like, I want to, like, this is a conversation we have every now and again about, like, would you want to see a female James Bond? And it's like, no, I want to see a really rad story centered around a female spy in her own right? Like, I don't need a female James Bond, A, because that's a lot of baggage she has to carry with her from that series of 50 years and a lot of shit. And B, because, like, I don't even, like, again, I don't know if I need, like, how much more James Bond I need, right? Like, it's okay. Like, I think we, and I'm going to just blame all of America on this, as American consumers of media, are so bad, and especially in the video game sphere of things, are so bad at letting things end. It's okay to just let things end. And, like, I think I'm someone who I think is particularly interested in the endings of stories, which is partially why I think I love Return of the Jedi, is that it just was allowed to end for 20 years, basically. That was just it. And then even after that, right? I mean, until the sequel trilogy, that was the ending. So for, 35, 40 years almost, right? And, like, I liked that. Like, that was just it, right? Like, we filled out 4, 5, and 6, and we went back and tell how we got there, but that was it. That was Star Wars, right? And I think I always enjoyed that aspect of it, right? Like, I like when we can just allow stories to end, and we don't have to go reboot some game. We don't have to, like, recast some game. We don't have to bring back these old stories again. Like, I think it works in certain characters. I think, to Cameron's point, I think Sherlock Holmes is different because he was a literary character, and I think there is already that built-in idea of, like, yeah, we're going to see different iterations of this character, and the fact that he is so old and was just constantly being evolved. I think part of the issue with Star Wars is that those three people were the three characters for 40 years, right? Like, we didn't have them get recast for 2 generations, basically.
Because they weren't they weren't in one of those generations.
Yeah, because, well, sure, but also because they, they took that time, but, like, they didn't do new stories. And so we just naturally associated Luke Skywalker as Mark Hamill, Princess Leia as Carrie Fisher, and Han Solo's Harrison Ford, and we're just not going to make any more of these movies. That's just who they are, right? And so I think when now you kind of approach it of, like, should have recast them, people have built into their mind the idea of, like, no, that's who that person is. It's who it's been for 40 years, right? And I think that's sort of the problem too, is that, like, if they had done more stories immediately, I think there would be less resistance. But because the fact that they've just left it there for 40 years, people are going to say, why would you want to do that? That's who these people are. And I understand that to some degree, right? Like, I think that's a natural feeling, right? Like, this is something that, like, especially if you've grown up, like, certainly myself and Cameron have, who are just, like, freaks about Star Wars, like, you who've just consumed so much of this content and have gotten really deep into, like, the nerd shit. It's like, yeah, like, I'm 29, Cameron is 31. And so, okay, perfect. And so, for 3 decades, basically, we've just understood, like, oh, these are these characters, these are these stories, these are these beats. Because, like, even when you get to, like, the Star Wars comics and like novels, they're using their images in them too, right? Like they're not doing like different like versions of people look like. They're using Harrison Ford's face, Mark Hamill's face, and Carrie Fisher's face. So it's just further ingrained there, right? And I think you just build up over time. They do like, yeah, these are these people, right? And to the point Trevor gave earlier of like Dumbledore, I would argue we have an example of that in the Harry Potter film series, and it's weird as shit, right? Because they just completely changed that character, right? Like, not even like they gave him a different face with a different actor. Like, that is a whole ass different version of Dumbledore that he did, right? Like, he is like a dirty hobo in the movies like 3 through 7, and it's weird. It's weird watching them. And like, obviously, they didn't have to go that extreme. They could have just made him be the same person, just a new face. They chose to go in a different direction. I think it doesn't work. Spoiler alert, but. Right, like I think even that is like kind of jarring to watch, and that was something that happened with like a 2 or 3 year gap, right? Like it's hard to recast characters in the same series for the Carrie Fisher point. Like I think that would have been weirder for me if they had just said recast her in the last movie. And I understand, you know, wanting to get that character's full story told, but I think that's one of the ones for me, like maybe if Carrie had passed away before the sequel trilogy, then you can do something in terms of being like, all right, we want her to be a part of this story. Or even if she had passed away maybe in like 7 and had filmed nothing for 8 or 9, right? Then you could be like, maybe we'll recast her last year. But like, I think the very end of her, like the very end of the story, the very end of the trilogy, it'd have been so jarring if they brought someone new in at that last second. Certainly I personally think, right? Like I've long said, I agree with Trevor. I think it's weird what they did that movie anyway. I think obviously the best option probably would have just been to not have her in at all. She passed away off screen, have the movie begin with like her funeral service kind of thing. They went a different direction. I think it's one of the many issues of Rise of Skywalker, as I've talked about extensively. But like, I also think there's no right answer, right? Like, obviously, if they want to recast this like James Bond, I'm not going to have any issues. I just think all of the examples I can think of characters that have been reinvented didn't have such a long gap. And I think that's part of the issue with definitely segments of the Star Wars fan community, is that like they've just kind of solidified the idea that like these are these characters and these actors, and they're just entwined together. Whereas for James Bond, it was 10 years and we got a new guy in, right? And then we had a new guy in and we had a new guy in, and he was a book character before. So like it was already like kind of everyone's idea of what he looked like was different.
Yeah, I mean,
versus these being film people.
I wonder what the conversation was at the time when Sean Connery. I mean, well, like I mean, you probably know better than anybody, Logan. Like, even though it was only 10 years with Connery or whatever, like people were really resistant to there being a new James Bond at the time, right? Especially given that Connery could have kept playing the role and all that stuff. So it's like it's definitely a weird conversation.
James Bond is really
I don't know if
interesting.
we need to go that much.
We don't need to get like too into the
hole,
weeds, obviously. Yeah, but like it's definitely James Bond is interesting. I think because George Lazenby was such a different person in like every single way from Sean Connery. Like there's so few similarities from like the Scottish Uberman of Sean Connery to like an Australian model in George Lazenby, who's not an actor professionally at all, was like a hair cutter, right? And then, so I think that was such a jarring change, but there was also, I think, a not insignificant element of the fact that like 1969 pop culture was very different from 2018,
Yeah,
right? Like I think the world that these characters were placed in allowed it to be just kind of accepted versus now I think pop culture is such a powerful force, and fan communities are so powerful, for better or worse, and not insignificantly worse, that like I don't know how well that would have flown. I mean, we saw, I think, a tiny idea of this in terms of Daniel Craig, right? Just because he had blue eyes and blonde hair, people people lost their shit, right? And then end up watching the movie anyway because obviously they don't actually care. They're easy to get, they're just upset. But like, I do think that there's like, in a similar vein of like Doctor Who, right? Like if these things happen today, I do wonder if they would have worked in the same way in terms of those transitions.
Yeah. Or all the different Batman we had
in the 90s. Not an incorrect thing to bring up.
100%,
right?
And
like,
through today.
And I think,
yeah,
like I think that's an excellent point to bring up.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's review
Yeah,
it.
let's go ahead and head off into report card land, where we grade each of our films from A plus to F. I'm gonna go completely off script this time around. Cameron,
Yes,
hit us with your grade for this one first.
B plus.
B plus. All right.
Shout out to you, Cameron.
I love it. But I understand the flaws of this film.
Yeah.
You know, Kessel Run Kessel Run withstanding. I agree with Logan on pretty much every front that he talked about.
Oh.
And like what everybody else did. I think possibly Frank had the most poignant point when he pointed out that Mandalorian does this better. And I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep. Logan, hit me with yours.
Yeah, it's weird because like I've obviously talked, I feel like, pretty negatively about the movie, but like I think it's largely just because like I said at the top, I get more worked up when a movie is decent but boring, and I think this movie just is largely not super exciting for me. But like on the whole, the movie is still, I mean, like a C probably, right? Like it's well made, it's well shot. Like Ron Howard is like he can frame things well when he gets the chance to not just like freeze frame on stuff. I do like most of the cast other than Emilia Clarke, who I have ragged on a little bit. I really do love you as a person, Emilia, I'm sure. But like I think there's a lot that works there. I just think that it's routinely not high energy. Like it just seems like a very just like, okay, that's 2 hours that happened, right? And it wasn't bad, just wasn't really great either. And so I would say a C.
Yeah. Frank.
I think I'm pretty much in agreement with Logan there. Like I was kind of debating in my head even before he weighed in, where it was like, oh, C minus or C, and I was gonna go C minus, but it seems like a little bit too harsh for what this movie actually is. You know,
it is just average, right?
Yeah.
Like dead on a C,
but in like a frustrating way, like you pointed out. Like I think that's very like a poignant thing as well.
I'm gonna go C minus myself. And for a lot of the same stuff, like it is a 70. It is a 70 out of 100. It is barely there in C, and it just, you know, like I was looking through, I'm like, this, like let's see, I gave Phantom Menace a C minus as well. And I gave Attack of the Clones a B plus, and I'm like, I would rather watch this than Attack of the Clones, but that's like barely. Yes. And a lot of it is, I think, a lot of the same kind of things you touched on, Logan, of like, there are a lot of great elements about this, as long as you don't think of it as a solo movie, as a Han Solo movie. If it was just like a fun fun Star Wars heist movie, with a little bit of like, I mean, it's almost like, it is like that, you know, Solo's 11 or something like that. Obviously not 11 actual characters in there, but you know, it's that kind of feel to it. And I would much prefer that, but yeah, it is certainly on the weaker side of things. Not quite D plus for me, but definitely just kind of like it's there, and I'm fine if I ultimately like never really sit down and watch this one again. But so there we go.
Yeah.
So now let's rank it in our big old hierarchy of things. As a refresher, I got to renumber some stuff because I had not done that. Our number 11 so far, Attack of the Clones. Number 10, Rise of Skywalker. Number 9, The Clone Wars. Number 8, The Phantom Menace. Number 7, Revenge of the Sith. Number 6, The Last Jedi. Number 5, The Force Awakens. Number 4, Rogue One. Number 3, A New Hope. Number 2, Empire Strikes Back. And number 1, Return of the Jedi. So where do we want to throw Solo in that mix? Does it surpass any of the prequels?
I think it definitely does, but let me throw this out here. You guys can like lower it down afterwards. I'm going to buoy this thing real up high and like hold it as high as I can, and you guys can like hang on it and drag it down as far as you can, and we'll see like where we end up with it. I put this above. Yeah, because for me, I have like massive structural issues with Last Jedi. I put it above The Last Jedi.
Okay, so you put it at number 6 then. Cameron,
I think.
Go ahead, Logan. Hit me, Logan.
I was just gonna say, I come at it from the other perspective, right? In terms of like, this is how I grade James Bond movies. This is how I'm gonna grade the Star Wars movies too. I would rather watch Revenge of the Sith than this. Like, I think that's a movie that I find really fun, right? Like that to me is a movie that is like flawed, obviously.
Deeply, yeah.
It's got issues, but that movie's fun. I really do think like Revenge of the Sith is like a fun time to have, right? Like I really enjoy watching that movie, right? Like I think it is clearly, apart from Cameron, the best prequel movie. I think we all agreed, and so like I would rather watch that, right? Because I think that movie is. You could make an argument, maybe a worse made movie, but I think it's more enjoyable and more fun to be had watching it versus this, which I think is like well made, but just like totally like that happened for 2 hours kind of thing. So like I would put it wherever Revenge of the Sith that, one below that.
One below Revenge of the Sith. So you would put it then at number 8 between Revenge of the Sith and The Phantom Menace. How about you, Frank?
Sounds good to me.
I'm pretty much on the same page with Logan there again. Like that's kind of what I was thinking, and pretty much for the same reason as
Nice.
well. Because it's like, yeah, like I do think that in some ways, especially because it is more modern, this is like a better made movie. But on the other
Yeah,
hand,
right,
it's like
whatever
I
it
would
means.
probably rather watch Revenge of the Sith like 9 out of 10 times.
Hell yeah.
Like
Revenge of the Sith sleepover. Heard it first. Me and Frank.
I'd be so down for that.
Hell yeah. All right, we're gonna plan that.
All right, I can get behind that. So we will put Solo in there at number 8, behind Revenge of the Sith and above The Phantom Menace. That's probably where I would put it too. I'm coming at it less from a like Revenge of the Sith is better and more this is better than The Phantom Menace, and I don't know how much higher I would go than that. Like I don't know if I would go. Yeah. I mean, I think I was probably cooler on Revenge of the Sith than you guys, so I might have put it up there a little bit
Yeah.
more. But I'm fine with this going there.
There's no way in hell Trevor was going to let me keep it above.
I mean, it definitely wasn't going above
Last Jedi.
The Last Jedi. No, fuck that.
Yeah,
noise.
I mean, none of us were gonna have
yeah,
that.
fuck you, Caitlin.
Hey, listen, I told you I love this movie.
Yeah.
I was going to carry it as high as I could. I took it to The Last Jedi. You guys pulled it back down to below Revenge of the Sith. And here's the thing, I'm okay with that.
So I will
Because I was going to fight
I
tooth
will
and nail if you
say-
guys were going to say that the slander that this film is worse than Attack of the Clones.
no, it was not.
I would
this
say-
was
I
definitely
will
not
say-
the bottom of the
yeah.
barrel for us.
Yeah, I will say this because I wasn't on the episode, so I didn't get to talk about it. I do think that the Phantom Menace, like, it's super mad boring and like chill, but like I enjoyed. Like I've talked about this before. Like I would love to sit down and talk to Cameron about the Phantom Menace. The Phantom Menace to me is like totally like it is like a game of golf. Like you put it on the weekend and just like zone out and like vibe with the Phantom Menace. Like it's like a perfect like Sunday afternoon. It's a warm day outside and just like hang with the Phantom Menace for like 2.5 to like 3. It feels like 4 hours. It's great. Like you just like chill, man. Like it's I do not dislike the Phantom Menace. I just think it's like super slow, but like the end is fun and like it is like the movie I think I could most just like have on in the background while like doing stuff on a Sunday. I will say that.
So with that, I want to invite you all for next week's episode. Once we've when we are wrapping everything up with the Empire of Dreams,
An
to go ahead and bring
invitation.
your own personal rankings. Like we obviously have this is our kind of like site wide list, but clearly Cameron is higher on some movies than others. I'm higher on Last Jedi than clearly everybody else and stuff like that. So bring your own kind of like personalized rankings to.
I've been updating mine on Letterboxd for all my fans out there.
There you go.
so.
And we will dedicate some time to that in the final episode of our Summer of Star Wars next week. Once again, when we dive into the Empire of Dreams documentary on Disney Plus. Extra credit, other suggestions if you like this one. As we have been back to the core films, this is pretty much in line with what we saw last week. The other suggestions are Rogue One is kind of the first suggestion you get, and then you get The Mandalorian, so basically like the new things, the Disneyfied Star Wars things, and then you get A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, and the sequel trilogy, Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and Rise of Skywalker. So they do not recommend going back to the prequel era to see the prequels to this prequel. Extracurriculars, anybody watching anything else on Disney Plus? I've been watching, of course, What If, which had its second episode this week. Really enjoying that. fun Marvel series. I'll also say the Bad Batch wrapped up last week, and I watched that entire series and have forgotten so much of it. Like ultimately it's been like a very disappointing season of Star Wars animation. And I don't know if that's because they just haven't really focused in on characters that I'm interested in, or they just haven't gotten to like a cool story to tell. Like, I like it fine. It's just I'm not super invested in it. And admittedly, like if I watch the first season of Clone Wars, I'm probably not super invested in that either. So maybe it will grow over time, and Omega will become more like an Ahsoka type character. That definitely seems to be kind of what they're building the show around, but who knows where that will actually end up. But it will be coming back for season 2, so I'm sure I'll check in on that. I think I mentioned last week I sat down and watched a couple episodes of the behind the attraction thing. I haven't watched any more of that, but yeah, What If was the big thing I really enjoyed this week, especially because this week's episode was the What If T'Challa was a Star-Lord episode, and it's the final performance we got from Chadwick Boseman. It's just really good, and really shows like the cool ideas that type of show can have, I think. So shout out to that. Anybody watching anything else?
I wish Ted Lasso's kind of taken over my life a little bit when it comes to TV.
Nothing wrong with that. We gotta now that you are on board this train, Cameron, you gotta help me get Logan on board this train, because how much of that
I'm totally.
That is a Logan-ass
you
show,
get-
right?
Yeah, I'm
you
totally
get
on board.
6 free months of Apple Plus TV. Only thing worth probably watching is Ted Lasso. I haven't checked anything else out.
I like
but
Schmigadoon.
it is-
Schmigadoon is all wrapped up.
Schmegadoon,
now.
that's another one I got to check out. I will say this though, Ted Lasso. When it comes to Ted Lasso, Logan, you like Scrubs, right?
I love Scrubs.
You love Scrubs. Okay,
You know what else
did
I
you
love?
love Boy Meets World
I love
growing up?
Cougar Town too.
Hell yeah.
Okay, I love Bill Lawrence.
Yeah, you love Bill Lawrence. So you loved Boy Meets World and everything too.
Bill Lawrence didn't work on Boy Meets World. You mentioned that
I
at
know
one
Bill
point.
I was wrong on that one. That's fine.
I meant to
Ignore that I said that.
I meant to call you on that after the show or something. But yeah, Bill Lawrence had nothing
fine, don't
to do
worry
with
about
Boy
it.
Meets World.
I don't know why I keep associating him with Boy Meets World. That's fine.
No,
If you love Bill
he was
Lawrence,
Spin City,
he-
Scrubs, and Cougar Town, and now
There
Ted
you go.
Lasso.
All
He
of which are some of
created
my
Ted
favorite
Lasso.
shows.
It is a Bill Lawrence ass show.
Zach Braff comes in and directs some episodes.
He does. He directs the second
I
episode.
love that.
And I will say also, it has taken the Bill Lawrence attitude towards everything British in the best possible way, and it's so damn good. One of the best early moments you get with Ted Lasso when he sits down with his boss, and like it's somewhat referenced through in a couple other episodes, and it always follows me back to him like, he's right. Like, he's right about that British thing. He's right.
Okay. Yeah, I think you would really enjoy Ted Lasso. I think Cameron and I are also probably on the same page that you would really like Free Guy, I think.
Oh, Free Guy was so good.
Yeah.
It was so good. It was so stupid. It was so, well, not even stupid. It was so stupidly good.
Yeah.
It's like, how did this
Excited.
movie end up being great? And it does.
Jumanji's
Especially,
good.
yeah, especially since
Jumanji Welcome to
you
the
mentioned
Jungle's
you
good.
finally watched Jumanji, which I almost brought up earlier in the
Yes.
episode, like in the idea of like recasting, and obviously it wasn't a recasting of Robin Williams, but they proved that Jumanji can outlast
Yeah, that was like
an iconic character like Robin
Yeah.
Williams. So, but yeah, especially if you like Jumanji and some of the other movies I've kind of alluded to in the past, I think you would really enjoy Free Guy. So definitely go check out Free Guy. Check out Ted Lasso. Yeah, this isn't an Apple Plus podcast. We'd have to come up with the A Plus show.
If you want to sponsor
that
us,
A Plus show.
I mean, yeah.
I
But yeah,
regret nothing by bringing
in
it
that
up.
vein, I will also say that Schmigadoon did wrap up. It was apparently only a 6-episode thing, and that all told, it's like basically a 3-hour musical just told over 6 episodes. It was a fun story. I think
There you go.
it definitely
I've been watching
fun in that, like-
clips on YouTube. They're very good.
Yeah. Fun in that like vein of, if you know the musicals it's kind of referencing, like it is really nailing the tone of those musicals, but with a modern sensibility to it. So lots of fun there. Well, that is gonna do it for this episode of That D Plus Show. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. You can follow Cameron at Rev Cabot. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
Yeah, look forward to actual streams from me. Some changes were made at work. I start earlier, which means I get off earlier now. Um, you know, we'll cross my fingers. Hopefully, we're really busy. That's why we're actually moving up an hour earlier, so we can get more time in the day to work on stuff. But yeah, it's a good time. Look forward to some streams, or at the very least, let's plays that I want to do. Because there's some really cool stuff that I want to do.
I also want to do Let's Plays.
You can follow Frank at Irrelevant Jokes. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Frank?
Yeah, just a quick shout out to our other show, That Nerdy Site Show. In reference to what we were just talking about, the last episode is a spoiler cast for Free Guy. And it sounded like a great movie. Like, it looked like fun, and I know you guys really liked it, and my other friend who saw it really also enjoyed it. So I definitely recommend people check that out, and then also go see Free Guy.
Cool. I will say, Free Guy is a Frank ass movie. That is for sure.
It sounds like it.
Yeah,
a Frank ass and a Logan ass movie. I'm here for it.
I mean, it's
just Sonic the Hedgehog 2.
Yes, yeah, can't wait.
I mean, sorta, yeah.
Yeah, in a way, yeah. Weirdly, yeah.
You can follow Logan at Lefty Logan. Anything you would give some love to there, Logan?
I will give a shout out to our other podcast, That News You Care About, where myself and Trevor went back and ranked some of the best games from the years we were born. In his case, 85. In my case, 92. Turns out they were pretty good years for video games, actually, all things considered, considering how early they are. I actually had a lot of fun with that conversation.
Speaking of Sonic the Hedgehog 2.
Yep.
Speaking of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, so that'd be a fun thing to do with, I think, getting Frank and Cam on the podcast later on. Yeah, give a shout out to that. Go check that out. Go check out youtube.com/thatnewssite as well to take Trevor's shout out in a minute here.
Thanks. Yeah, I was actually going to say, I feel like I originally pitched that like best games of our birth years as a possible idea for one of our Patreon early access episodes. So it was definitely something that I would have, brought up in the context of Cameron and Frank being on that or something. But yeah, since we did it for That News You Care About instead, we'll figure out a way to get those
invite you on
years,
to the podcast.
Because what years would those be for you guys, Cam and
89 for me.
89
mine's
for Cam.
90, mine's 97.
97, yeah. So Frank has freaking Final Fantasy 7 in his.
Frank is so young.
Hey.
Yeah, there you go.
89.
I don't know what you got in 89. I mean, so like definitely
Sonic
some good
was like
Nintendo
90.
stuff.
Yeah.
Some Mario game, yeah, I'm sure.
Anyway, yes, you can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey, and as Logan alluded to, I will shout out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/thatnerdysite, where I am in the throes of a Let's Play series of me playing through Hades. After its first weekend on PlayStation, I got my first clear in like the normal story of it, so I decided for a Let's Play series to go ahead and start a new game, turn on the God mode, which incrementally like makes the game easier every run, and basically see how quickly I can get a clear in that game. I have, spoiler for the first, I guess, 7 episodes so far. I have recorded 7 episodes, and because of that, I'm going to be uploading extra episodes on the weekends for the foreseeable future. So there will be bonus Saturday and Sunday Let's Plays that anybody can go check out. But yeah, so far, as of this going live, episodes 1 and 2 are up, and then you can kind of see my continued journey as I go through. I've already, like, in episode 1, I made it to the first boss. In episode 2, I made it to I made it past the first boss, halfway through the second area and stuff. So I'm progressing at a much faster pace than I'm used to progressing in this. I will just say that. And so it shouldn't take me, I think the runs to beat is like 24 is how many it took me on PlayStation 5 in regular mode. So I should be able to easily clear it sooner than that in God mode. And yeah, I think I'm on track for that. It'll just be a matter of like, how lucky do I get with my runs and stuff like that. But go check that out as our current Let's Play series. But then also, as I mentioned at the top of the show, go check out our YouTube channel just in general, because there's a lot of new playlists kind of highlighting some of our more specific series or iterations of series and stuff like that. So that's out there for you. And yeah, that is going to do it. So you can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site, or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. Once again, if you liked what you heard, please like, rate, review, subscribe, go share the links with your friends, all that fun stuff. And if you do feel so inclined, you can always support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite. Thank you for joining us. As always, stay nerdy, be good to each other, class dismissed, and may the force be with you.